looks like yours is coming too. Okay. Oh, they will? Okay. Usually he gives me a thumbs up when I'm ready to start. Are you good? Okay. All right. Good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, April 1st, 2020. We really are doing a remote meeting on April Fool's Day. Thank you for everyone hopping on this evening. We're going to go through our quick online start, which we did last week as well, but we'll do this each time we have a public meeting that's done via virtual. So pursuant to subsection 403A of the 1 MRSA, we will now confirm that each member of the RSU 5 Board of Directors can both hear and be heard. We will do this by calling the roll. Members present are asked to say yes. We ask all other members to listen and report any audio difficulties when the roll call is complete. Kate Brown.
Yes.
Jeremy Clough.
Yes.
Candy DeSipkis.
Yes.
Lindsay Fertney.
Yes.
Jen Galetta.
Yes.
Susanna Hancock.
Yes.
Beth Munson.
Yes.
Maura Pillsbury.
Yes.
I can hear everyone. Valerie Steverlink.
Yes.
Maddie Vertenton.
Yes.
And Liam Hornchild Bear, our student rep this evening.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so we would now like to confirm that members of the public that are remotely attending this public proceeding are able to hear all members. If a member of the public is experiencing audio difficulties, please report them when we take everyone off mute for a moment. Additionally, all participants can send a message for technical difficulties via the Zoom chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen or via email to board@rsu5.org. Recognizing that this is only the board's second time conducting a meeting in this manner to help combat the spread of COVID-19, we ask the community and all members to proceed with patience and understanding that the district staff and board members are doing our very best during these unprecedented times. As a reminder, to conduct an orderly meeting, all board members and community members must wait to be recognized by the chair before speaking by using the raise hand option, which if you click on the participants down bottom, it should bring it up over on the right-hand side. You'll have the opportunity to raise your hand there. This evening's agenda has 2 opportunities for public comment from non-board members and administrators that are asked to speak, and that's number 7 and number 15 on our agenda. So we ask that members of the public keep their microphones muted, except for when they are called upon to speak by myself when after you've raised your hand during those times. So I'm just going to ask if someone other than a board member could just pop off mute for a second and let us know that you can hear everything we're saying.
Working loud and clear.
Great. Thanks, Nancy. All right. So we will get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Ginny, for moving the flag for us. Much better that time. We're learning every time. Okay, number 5, adjustments to the agenda. Becky?
Yes, we have one adjustment to the agenda that we would like to put under new business, and that would be discussion with the board for consideration of changing credit requirements for seniors.
Okay, and we're going to put that after our unfinished business. That will go in 13 under new business. Okay, great. All right, so we will move on to good news and recognition. Liam, if you had a report for us, that would be great.
Hi, everyone. So weird times for sure. There isn't any direct news that I can report right now. Of course, we're out of school, but I thought I'd talk a bit about some of the things that I've noticed to work really well with the online schooling. I found it really important to schedule my day, for example, get up at a certain time, have classes from given time, like 8 o'clock to 9:30, really say I'm going to do this class then. And also kind of finding a hobby or any regular activity that you can do has also really helped eat away some of that free time that I've had right now. So jogging, walking my dog, something I really say I do on a daily basis. So another thing that I noticed worked pretty well for so far, I thought it worked pretty well, was the attendance form that Mr. Mellon sends out every day. Having the gift card, can't really call it a raffle, I guess, but having to think about where the picture is. I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's an email with a picture from somewhere in Freeport High School, and we have to guess where it is. And I think if we get so many guesses right, we've got a chance to win a gift card. That's kind of kept me reading through the entire email. So I think that's worked pretty well. Yeah, I don't think there's too much else to report right now, but it's going surprisingly well. Actually, one more thing. So I'm taking a weight training class. So at first I kind of wondered how I would take an online weight training class, but it's working pretty well. I've been able to go outside and enjoy the sun when it comes out, do my weight training out there or do it inside the house, but it's going a lot better than I expected. So that's great. That would be it.
Thank you, Liam. I like the idea of the picture in the school. That's a great idea. Okay, so we are now to the first public comment period in our agenda this evening. So if you are a member of the public and you wanted to share something during this public comment, we ask that you use that raise hand button down bottom right. It's a little blue hand. And once I've called on you, we just ask that you provide us with your name, where you live, and keep comments to 3 minutes. Okay, so Nancy, I see you have your hand up, so the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you in person, sort of. My name is Nancy Salmon. I'm a dance artist, educator, and choreographer. During the nearly 40 years that I've lived here in Freeport, it's been my privilege to work with our students and teachers as a choreographer for high school musicals, and also in the elementary and middle school classrooms and gymnasiums as a visiting artist, using dance to teach and inform science curriculum, literature, health, as well as dance as a creative endeavor. Tonight, I'm here as a board member for the Arts and Cultural Alliance. ACAF has decided to go forward with our plans to develop Meeting House Arts, the renovation of the First Parish Congregational Church into a gallery and performing space for our communities. Our plans and timelines have changed as we all adapt to the reality of COVID-19 and the financial hardships and uncertainties of the disease. However, more than ever now, we need and will need post-COVID-19 that soul-enriching opportunity that the arts offers us as audience members, as creators, and as learners. ACAF has expanded our offerings, our ways of connecting people through the arts in this time of physical separation. When we can gather again in person, we all want Meeting House Arts to be ready and available for students to show their work, for teacher workshops, for new artist gatherings, and for a robust community scene. I see Meeting House Arts as a bridge for our student artists to connect with the larger community outside the school building, a safe stepping stone from the familiar and comfortable walls and stages of the school into the larger community of artists and audiences. Meeting House Arts can be a place for continuing education of our young artists and our young audiences, and actually a continuing ed place for all of us as we engage with ideas, new and old. So ACAF is asking the school board for a substantial donation to support Meeting House Arts. However, we know that you're making painful decisions about budgets, about what stays and what goes. We still need your support. Your financial support for Meeting House Arts is really important to us. The signal that your donation sends is equally important. Please just be as generous as you can. And thank you all for all your work. Thanks.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up, but I know we have at least one person who's on the phone. So obviously they don't have the functionality of raising their hand. So I just wanted to provide a second to see if they had anything they wanted to share from the phone. Okay, so we will carry on with our agenda. Report from the no, we don't have any superintendent report, administrator reports, board comment, or committee reports, no policy review. Okay, so we are up to unfinished business, consideration and approval for the RSU 5 distance learning plan. This is was originally provided to the board for our first stab at a discussion last week, and I'll send it over to Becky.
All right, so I just wanted to kind of give a brief update about where we are. On March 18th, we began remote learning. Today marks the completion of the second week of remote learning for our staff and students. This all began after teachers had only 2.5 days to prepare for this change in teaching platforms. Our teachers, administrators, and support staff have worked diligently to provide the best education possible during these days. And we believe that every day we are learning more and getting better at delivering education in this way. And I have to tell you, it seems like it's been longer than 2 weeks, but that's all it's been. So I feel really proud of how far our staff have come in a very short amount of time. And I'm really confident that we will continue to improve on our delivery as we move forward. But I'm very impressed with what we've been able to accomplish in a very short amount of time. Our administrative team met remotely this past Friday and on Monday. We had discussions around altering the model. For example, going 4 days a week and extending the learning time to the end of June in the student calendar. We also discussed going to school through April vacation. Today, Cynthia and I met remotely as Cumberland County superintendents, and the only two districts that we learned that are going to go through April vacation are Gray, New Gloucester, and then the tiny district of Long Island, which you can imagine has a very small staff and very few students. As you know, I also sought clarification about whether we could just either have staff take furlough days, or whether we could kind of lay some staff off between now and the end of the year in order to save some money in the budget. And because of the executive order, that is not allowed. So after much discussion on the administrative team, we believe that it's in the best interest of students to go to school 5 days a week and take a much needed break during April vacation, kind of for the following reasons. We really want to kind of simulate the traditional school week and model as much as possible. And remote learning on a daily basis provides our students with instruction and really establishes some sense of normalcy or predictability to their daily routines that we think is really critical during this time of constant change. The social and emotional needs of students have been heightened due to the stress and anxiety that's resulted from this virus. I think we're all feeling that. And we feel like students being able to access staff 5 days a week for support is very helpful to many of our students. We feel that the April break is a much needed break for all of us, both staff and students. Adjusting to this new model so quickly has taken an emotional toll on all of us. We have required a lot of our teachers in this district to switch to this model in a very short amount of time. Many of our students and staff are looking forward to the break and have a mindset that if we can just hold on for 2.5 weeks, that there will be an opportunity to kind of relax and re-energize to make it through to the end of the year. I feel like we've had principals weigh in, and the vast majority of the staff would be very disappointed if we did away with the April break. The administrative team, they have also begun an initial discussion about the possibility of offering some type of summer academy or summer school for those students who experience, for one reason or another, significant learning loss. The details have not been worked out around that, and we'll continue to have discussions, and a lot of it will depend on really when we are able to go back to school. You know, it'll be probably a different scenario if we're able to get back to school at the beginning of May versus if we remain in this model through the end of the year. So we would still have to figure out the criteria we would use to identify which students would be invited to participate in this type of summer program. And my initial thinking would be to use savings from this year to fund that program. There was a question that I received this week about what we're doing, what distance learning looks like for our students with disabilities. So I've asked Bonnie to speak to that for a few minutes. So I'll hand it over to her.
Okay. Well, so this has been a bit of a learning curve for us. We have students with a range of disabilities. And so in looking at this a couple weeks ago, when we had the 2 days to kind of reflect on how we could proceed, you know, it seemed like such a daunting task. Like, how do we make this work for students that are getting, you know, such intensive instruction in some cases, and, you know, consultation in others. So based on students' disabilities, you know, some of them are involved in the general ed classroom pretty much all day long, and they get consultation, or they might get, you know, some reading or other academic instruction And sometimes that happens in the classroom, and sometimes that happens through a pull-out approach. And then, some of our students have more intense needs, and so they might get more time in special ed. Usually it's in a classroom, and they're not there the whole day, but some of the time they're getting specially designed instruction. And then we have some students that have disabilities where they really have to be in a more self-contained classroom. So when we started discussing a couple weeks ago, how do we manage this in terms of such different levels of support that's required for our students? So here we are in week 2, and I'm amazed at how well we're doing with some of our classrooms. So for all of our students right now, they're part of a Google Classroom. And so what the teachers have done, the general ed teachers have created a Google Classroom, and this is like in the K-5 grade span. And they've invited all of our special ed teachers to be a part of that Google Classroom. And if students are getting related services like speech or OT or PT or social work, regular ed teachers have invited them as well to be part of the Google Classroom. And so we went back and forth about whether it would be easier to have a special ed classroom or a regular ed classroom. But we thought because it would be confusing for some of our students to be able to navigate that, and it would be easier for parents to navigate one classroom, we decided we would just be part of the regular ed classroom, which has really worked out very well. At the middle school and high school, they've already had that whole concept, or the technology for that was already in place. And so there wasn't a whole lot of change required there. So in the last week, actually beginning of this week, some of our teachers participated in different webinars. Like one of our speech therapists, well, actually a few of our speech therapists participated in a webinar to take a look at how to do what's called teletherapy. And one of them did a presentation on Zoom and really set up, she really reviewed how you set up a learning environment virtually, what needs to happen to minimize distractions, making sure that the presenter is, in the forefront and not in the background, making sure your clutter is somewhere else. And she talked about, basically how you create lessons, how you deliver instruction virtually. It was like amazing how well she did in terms of pulling some of our staff along who really needed, a lot more experience with technology. So I think, it was very well received. And so our staff started looking at how to provide, virtual lessons for students. And so at the elementary level, they're starting right now, actually they started this week, providing 20 to 30 minute timeframes of specially designed instruction. And some of it is, they're providing the lesson to the student. And sometimes they're trying to encourage, group participation, but that is a little bit challenging because some students have, they don't have a space to use just to be part of virtual learning. And so, depending on the situation, they're trying to invite students. And if it doesn't seem possible to do that, they're providing one-on-one instruction virtually. And they're doing it in 20 to 30 minute timeframes. And for some students who need more support, we're asking some of the ed techs to provide that support, so that more of our students probably right now are getting one-on-one instruction. But what we're trying to do is to move them to more like group instruction. So I've had, this week, our teachers have all started doing more with Google Meet or Zoom classrooms. And so I jumped into a couple of them. And I was really surprised at how engaged some of our students were in the groups that these teachers have designed. So, for example, I was in one classroom yesterday, and the teacher had her students, a special ed teacher had her students, and these are students that are in a specialized program, for most of the day. And she started with just a really quick, like, social interaction activity where they shared their most favorite possession and what they liked about being home. And, it was great because the students were sharing with each other. She was asking them questions. And you could tell, I mean, they were really like engaged and involved in it. And then she moved into doing academic instruction. So she, right now, when I talked with her today, she's providing instruction to her students from 8 in the morning till 10:30 in the morning. And they go from, they start every session, she said, with a social interaction activity. And then they get into the math, English, social studies, and science. And then in the afternoon from 1 to 2:30, she does the same with the same group, but they're doing more like adaptive living skills, and they're doing more, there's a class they've created, and they did this, this past year, or actually last year, Into the Looking Glass. And essentially they talk about what they'd like to do in the future, the skills they need to learn to prepare for that. And they spend, the hour, looking, really delving into that. In one of the sessions during the 1 to the 2:30, one day a week, they do like an art activity. So when I asked her today, how's this going for you? And she said that it was a big learning curve, but she said she figured it out. And she said, I think live learning like this is real. It really does engage all students. And she said, and I thought this was wonderful, she said, I am so proud of my students and of myself to be able to do this. And I thought, that speaks to, it has been an experience for all of us. But here we are in week 2, and we're really seeing some positives come out of that. That being said, there are some people that, some of our staff, are taking longer to get where we need them to be. But the interesting thing, and what I think is really speaks to some of our staff are pretty tech savvy, and they have been so willing to help each other through this process. I mean, we had a staff person yesterday who was explaining how you assign students, make assignments in a Google Classroom and make sure it's designated to the one student so that not everyone in that classroom sees the assignments, because, it honors the student's confidentiality and, what they're getting for special ed. And she actually ended up creating a video of how to do it, and she shared it with everyone. And so the nice thing about it is I think people are really looking to help each other. And so it's been a really collaborative process since we started this. And I really think, just in 2 weeks, they've come so far in terms of being able to provide, quality learning for students. And I guess moving forward, I just see that, getting even more effective in terms of what our students are learning. So it's it's evolving for sure. And people are really in different places, but I think we're really getting there. And I think some people are feeling like this is working and we're going to be okay. So I don't know if there are any questions.
I think what we'll do is go ahead and go through, or do you want to take questions here for special ed? Maybe we should do that, Michelle.
Maddie.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, and whoever asked the question, and Becky for asking Bonnie to speak. It's really helpful to hear how this is going for all of you and your staff, and I'm so grateful for the work that they're doing. I just wanted to ask briefly, I know at the last meeting, there was mention made that administrators were going to step up their efforts to be in touch with parents. So I'm wondering if your staff is doing that as well, in particular with these kids to see how families feel it's going for them? Can't hear Bonnie. She got muted.
Yes, she's muted. There she goes. Hold on, Bonnie, you're muted again.
I'm not touching it.
Okay,
My friend's really good.
we should hear you now.
I think I'm unmuted now. I just saw my microphone. Yeah. So actually, the first week that we were doing remote learning, again, when I described, like, how are we going to do this? That's the first thing our staff did is they called all the parents and just explained what we were going to be doing and gave them some ideas about how we would be providing their child with the services that they, were receiving, in school. And so they got parent input. And, some parents were very clear about how they thought it could work. And other parents, this was kind of new for them too, and they weren't really sure about the technology. And so we had a couple of teachers actually send parents, a video of how you kind of navigate Google Classroom. So that was really helpful. And since then, since we started the Google Classrooms and the Google Meets and the virtual lessons, they're in touch with parents probably more so now, because for the younger students, when parents are there helping their child, and we're talking about kids in like probably K through 3rd grade, it's really important for parents to be a part of that. And it's worked out pretty well. The parents have been, on board in terms of being able to, provide, prompts to their child and to, keep them at the table so they don't, leave and that kind of thing. So I think they've been in contact with parents. I think some parents really I think they find the technology challenging. And so for those parents, what they've been doing is just reaching out with phone calls. And so I know that a couple of teachers, when they're doing their classroom, after they're done and the student has to do independent work, the teachers will either call the student and walk them through how to do the task, or some parents, they'll call some parents and the parents will help with that. So I think at least for special ed, I think we have really reached out to parents and we're really looking to have them, be a part of this process if they can be. And we followed up with phone calls as well. So that's kind of what we're doing.
Thanks. Valley.
Thank you, Bonnie. That was really helpful. Now, I have a question about IEPs. Given all the challenges that come with this new model, especially for special ed students who may have a little more difficulty structuring their time, motivating, time on task, those types of skills that they may not have fully developed yet. Is there any leniency from the DOE in terms of what is required for meeting their IEPs? And do you guys have the flexibility to basically pare down the requirements that are currently in the IEPs, and just if you need to do more social, emotional, mental support, just pick a few really basic, important things that they need to master by the end of the year and let the rest go?
So the DOE has been, they started last week actually doing these Zoom meetings with, special ed staff, but they've also had Zoom meetings for all kinds of content as well, not just special ed. They've been, they've had some for social studies and English and K-5 and high school. So anyways, some of us were part of those Zoom meetings on special ed, because there was a lot of concern initially that if our district was providing remote learning, that we would have to, meet all the legal requirements of that IEP process. But that hasn't been the case. The Office of Special Ed Programs at the federal level has really softened a lot of the legal requirements so that for our students, what we're looking to do is to meet the intent of the IEP. So if we can't provide, all of the minutes of services that are in the student's IEP, they have said to us, don't worry so much about that. What we want you to do is to keep our students connected to learning and, provide the specially designed instruction as much as you can and, go for, quality rather than, a lot of time. And so, that was a bit of a relief because I think for some of our special ed people, including the special ed directors in the state, we were just struggling with how can we meet all the IEP requirements in this kind of learning environment. But, I have to say, I think at the federal level and certainly our main DOE, I think they appreciate what we're going through right now and what families are going through because this is really new for them as well. I think they're really, looking at this as, do what you can to keep our students connected. And some of the IEP, like the annual IEPs, where we've been able to do all of those virtually. So that's been helpful because our families have attended meetings with us virtually. And I think the first few that we did last week, people were like, oh, we're not sure how this is going to go. But some of our families actually said, wow, that was pretty smooth. That was better than I thought it would be. So that's been good. When it comes to the evaluations, though, every 3 years we have to do a triennial evaluation. And then when students are referred for initial evaluations, we have to, evaluate. So what we've done is we've suspended that because there's really no way you can do an evaluation with a student virtually because the evaluations are really standardized and they have to be administered in a very scripted way. So we're not doing evaluations right now. So the short answer to your question is the DOE has softened the requirements and, we're doing what we can, we're doing the best we can, and we're getting better at it. And that's what we want to see.
Beth.
Hi, thank you, Bonnie, for all that good information. I just had a quick question about now when you were saying you weren't doing evaluations, I get that. Is that so if a family though were having a real problem with, say, they have a 504 right now, but they really feel like there needs to be an IEP, and they're just really struggling, what would you suggest? Like reaching out, having meetings? I mean, how does that all work?
Well,
Over virtual.
Yeah. So most of our students who are referred, well, before they're referred for special ed evaluations, they're referred to, a student assistance team. And so they're part of an RTI, either academic or RTIB for behavior. And so that would continue for them. So the academic instruction continues to be provided by, either the literacy or the math interventionists. And for students with the behaviors, what we're doing is our social workers have been involved with the students and they've continued to do that. We also have a contract with a behavior specialist, and she has also continued to work with families and individual students. And so even though the evaluations are suspended, we're still, the district, maybe not through special ed per se, but the district continues to provide supports for them.
Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, Valerie, you got one more question? Go ahead.
I do, but it's not for Bonnie. So if anyone has a Bonnie question, I can wait.
I don't think Becky was done with the her presentation. Is it
Right,
just
no,
on?
there. Okay, so I'll wait until she's done.
Yeah, that's fair. We'll have more opportunity to talk
Thank
about
you.
it.
Okay, we also had a question about nutrition and how we're trying to reach all of our kids who kind of need to be fed during this time. So I'm going to kind of have Erin give a brief report.
Well, I think the most telling statistic is that in the 7 days before the last board meeting, we served 3,700 meals. And in the 7 days since that board meeting until today, we served 5,910 meals. So we're looking at a 60% increase since this time last week, and over 9,500 meals served so far. So I'm feeling pretty good about our reach to the children.
Okay, and then I was just going to have each principal just give kind of a brief update about how it's going in their building, and I thought I'd start with Julie at Moore Street.
Okay, so Bonnie has covered quite a lot of what's going on in our pre-K 5 schools, but I have to start with, there's never been a time I've been more proud to call myself the principal at Moore Street. Our team is working really, really hard to pull something that we didn't even imagine 2 weeks ago to now be the way we're now teaching and learning. And, you know, I mentioned this last week, but pre-K 2 by design, we just don't even use technology. We want real text in kids' hands. So, you know, I just want you to understand just the level of learning that is happening by our teachers right now is really, really high, and they are working so hard. So as everyone's mentioned, I think we are on day 11, and within that time, we've kind of pushed something out and now changed it again. So our first week or so, our focus was about connection. We wanted to just make sure that students kept seeing their teachers' faces, knew we were still here, reaching out in a way that we didn't ever kind of get any way to prepare them for this. So there was lots of video and read aloud and different things being pushed out to families. And then now starting this week, we're now in what we call phase 2, which is we've all shifted to the same platforms. So this was in response to how can we help teachers best, as well as how can we help families best. So everyone is now on Google Classroom, and we have this really predictable pattern of what families can expect. So each classroom is doing a Zoom classroom meeting. So an opportunity, it's optional, and an opportunity for all children to see each other and run a meeting just like we would at school. We've talked a lot about our responsive classroom community building, and that's a really key part in how we do that. And so that familiar, predictable pattern is what's happening in these Zoom meetings. I had an opportunity to drop into a couple today, and it was really great to see kids in and just seeing teachers do what they do best in just a different kind of setting. So twice a week, all classrooms are doing that. And then there is new learning being pushed out twice a week in all the content areas we typically teach via video in the Google Classroom, giving then families work at your own pace kind of model. So we're hearing from families that this is a lot for their 4 through 8-year-olds. You know, they've had to really shift their role, and there's very, you know, we need them on the team or this isn't going to work. So if they're out working or if they're at home working, like it's hard to juggle all of those roles for them. So we've kind of really tried to create this model that's going to support that. If families need to do all the work at the weekend because they just can't do anything in the week, that allows for that flexibility that different families might need. And then coupled with that, our teachers are doing one-on-one conferences with each student. So, you know, a check-in, hey, how's it going for you? Read to me, let me hear you read. Why don't you read to me what you've written? Those kinds of things, so that they can give that personal kind of feedback and motivate children to kind of keep going, even though they're not right there in the classroom. Our guidance team as well is working really hard. So our teachers are reaching out, and then those hard to reach families, our guidance team are kind of backing up and really supporting the families that need help in terms of how do we create a schedule. I've got 3 children across 2 schools who all need to be on a device at the same time. How can we figure this out as a family? So our guidance team are really available to coach families who need that help and support too, to just really figure this out as we go.
Thank you. Emily, would you like to add to that?
So Julie said a lot of it. I would say our big focus in the transition has been getting kids on the platform. And just to piggyback on Julie's comments, our staff are just, they're unreal. Like, I've never felt more proud to be an educator, and to see the lift that people did essentially in a week and a half is just amazing to me. So we are at a point, we have between 1 and 3 kids per homeroom who are not on the platform. And we've been making phone calls to those families, making sure they have a device in hand. We are in a great position to have enough staffing that we really can support kids. Like Julie said, we have kids that are getting supported kind of from a social emotional standpoint or family standpoint. We also today identified staff to support kids who just need kind of some academic coaching, like for kids who don't have executive functioning skills, to think through like, okay, these are my assignments for the next few days, and parent may be working remotely and not able to support them, that we have staff who will be the consistent person to help support a child with that with that piece. And then I'd say, as Julie did, a lot of it has been continuing on community building through optional morning meetings. All teachers have scheduled individual conferring with students, so one-on-one opportunities to provide feedback, check in with kids. And then we're also trying to just remind ourselves to give us, some time in letting parents settle into this new normal. We've had parents reach out, very supportive of the model. We've had a couple parents reach out with some ideas for improving the model, like making sure that links to meetings, it's the same link every week, so they can just put it in their calendar. They have it really accessibly. And then we've reached out, or some parents have reached out too, looking for ways like how to help me understand how this can look in my life with the business we run or our work schedules. And we've been able to connect with those parents via phone or via virtual meeting.
Thank you. Lisa from Pownell.
So Emily and Julie have said a lot of what I had planned to say. And I think part of that is, I hope what you hear is just a real coordination of efforts. I think all the work that RSU 5 has done at the elementary level together through PD and, work in PLCs is really a great value added piece that we're able to rely on. So, there's an ed tech at Moore Street that's helping with tech support. My teachers and their Durham counterparts are able to do some curriculum sharing. The strategists got out ahead of, the content to really help teachers focus on, what was most essential. Like Bonnie mentioned, different specialists have kind of taken the lead on troubleshooting for things that have come across. And I would say that the biggest thing that I've heard from my staff is that the contact they've had with families has really been around personalizing this. And like Emily said, like helping folks to understand that we're okay, that every household doesn't look the same. And it's been really great to have the extra support so that any kid that needs that extra virtual coaching can get it. Because at the elementary school, it really does take an adult or someone sitting next to a child to get some of this work done. So really helping families with that and supporting them. We had our second materials pickup on Monday, and we had 100% of those materials go home, and teachers were really thoughtful about providing materials that were not all online materials. My kindergarten teacher created these little Ziploc baggies of glitter and hair gel for them to practice their snap words so that it won't always be, kids in front of screens. So, everybody's just doing such a great job. I will say it's a huge lift, and, teachers are finding it takes 2 to 3 times the amount of time to create a lesson virtually than it would for them to prepare for a lesson, in their classroom. So I'm just really proud of how hard they're working, and it's always about putting students and families first. So I agree with what Julie and Emily said. I couldn't be prouder.
Thank you, Lisa. Will, could you talk about Durham?
Yeah, it's going to get increasingly difficult to follow up I think we started with Bonnie covered most of it already. I guess, so to avoid being redundant, one thing I'd say, we have the opportunity, obviously, at our school of seeing the full range from 4-year-olds to 14-year-olds. And so it's been, when we have our POCs yesterday, for example, just to see that whole progression of the child's experience from what pre-K children are being invited to participate in, and some of the feedback there, all the way up to the more sophisticated level of middle school students really accessing all their classes, getting feedback on their instruction, and just the quality of the acceleration of quality from teachers as they get much more and more familiar with this sort of context. And I think the other thing I would just add is it's been great to see everybody across our staff, but not just who are school-based, but who are people who are shared across buildings, really trying to reach out, saying what can they do to support this. We have a staff member who's actually been out on a medical situation for an extended period, who has been jumping into some of this social work guidance classes that are going on. There's a familiar face, and it's some way that he can contribute. So it's really been amazing how everybody's trying to rally to be as supportive as they can.
Thank you. Ray from Freeport Middle.
Okay, so Freeport Middle School, I mean, I think Will said it great. It's getting harder and harder to make the presentation because it is pretty similar in all our schools. And, you know, I echo what the other K-8 principals said about how amazing our staffs have been and how hard they're working. I will note that the one thing that they will all comment on is this model is much harder, and they are working much harder and spending more time to deliver this level of education to their kids. So, you know, our teachers, really dedicated themselves to make it great for our kids. You know, I look at our guidance counselors, our social workers, our nurses, our ed techs, and how they are really getting involved with kids and families to provide them the support around, anything they need. We couldn't have this model without that level of support from all of them. Our teachers have done a nice job transitioning full-time to Google Classrooms. They do report about, just being exhausted. We talked today in our groups about really kind of finding that healthy balance between their work and their personal lives, and making sure they're still getting fresh air and different things, because they are truly dedicating themselves to this. Mr. Walsh, as the assistant principal, has done an amazing job coordinating with teachers and kids and parents. And he is still doing the morning announcements every single morning. He has put in some guest teachers to help deliver it, but that gets delivered to the kids every single day in a class that he has created for each grade level in Google Classroom called the Falcon Nest. So that's been pretty awesome with Mr. Walsh there with that. And we have surveyed kids twice already. Another survey is going to go out tomorrow morning to get feedback, to continually look to improve it. We've emailed out to parents asking for feedback, and we meet with the teachers multiple times a week to get feedback. And that's why our kind of model has changed a little bit each week as we look to improve it. I'd say our struggle right now is the kids that aren't special ed but needed that RTI level support, and really trying to help them be successful in the classroom. And that's where we're spending a lot of time to really help those children. But that's really our next step with this. And one of the things I'd like to share is, in a team meeting today, multiple teachers were just talking about how they have learned a lot instructionally, and how when they get back to the real classroom, that this experience is going to make them a better teacher in the real classroom. So they are learning stuff that will help them in the long run as well.
Thank you, Ray. And Jen from the high school.
Hi, everyone. A lot of what I would say is just going to be echoing what other principals have said. So I'll just try to add some points that are, new or additional for the high school. I'd also just say how incredibly proud I am of our staff. It's just been amazing how hard everybody's working, and really trying to shift their practice to something that is, for some teachers, is a very new format. Also, I participated with Charlie Mellon and Cynthia Alexander in the principals meeting of all the principals of Cumberland County. And it was just, I was very proud of that meeting to think about that there's some places where we have figured things out and have started building systems, such as what Leah mentioned about attendance. That seems very, very messy in some other schools, in my opinion, and no disrespect to those schools, just that they're trying to come up with a system that I think is so far working very well for us. We're down to, I think students have figured out that we're not going to leave them alone, and we're just going to keep calling and saying, what can we do? What do you need for help to be able to get online? Charlie Mellon sends out a daily message every day just to connect with everyone. We're still keeping up with our daily announcements. The picture of the day is really hard if anybody wants to play. It's, small pictures around the school, and it's just, we've had great feedback from kids about that it's just something small but fun, but makes them, still feel connected to the building a little bit. We are seeking feedback from our teachers. Our teachers are meeting in departments every week. We're meeting with guidance counselors. We're meeting with, Charlie and I meet with the department chair team to just try to continually think about what is working best for our students. And that's led us to make some changes. One being that this week we decided to start by going to 4 days of instruction. And then the 5th day of the week is just for work and support and for enrichment opportunities. So for the enrichment, there's going to be a menu of things that kids can engage in all different content areas, trying to do some high interest things, but also to get them off screens. There's some non-screen time opportunities for that. And a real challenge that we're facing is that we have feedback from some students and parents is that the workload is totally manageable. We have a very small number of parents who are saying their kids don't have enough to do. That has been our smallest number in terms of the amount of feedback that we're getting. Then we have a group of kids who are feeling like this is totally manageable. They're doing okay. And then we have a number of students who are feeling like they are just totally overwhelmed. And that is for a multitude of reasons. That can be struggles with their organizational skills, and that can also be their course load. Some of our kids take 8 intense courses, while others might have study hall, multiple electives. They might have work study where they work at a job. And so that plays a major role. Students who are in Region 10 is 4 of their 8 classes. So that plays a major role in what they're trying to manage for their online classes. So we're just trying to continue to get feedback from kids. We have staff reaching out to individual kids. And one of the things that we're going to start adding is we're making a list of our highest risk non-special ed students and assigning someone to do a daily check-in with them so that they can talk about, what's your goal for the day? How are you going to get that accomplished? And so I think that will be really helpful for some of those kids. We've shared a graphic organizer with kids just as a suggestion of how they can organize their day, and we'll continue to do those tips. I did share, I know the board mentioned this last week, of how powerful the online meetings are, and that they can really change the day of a student. And we've been talking about that a lot with staff. And last Friday, we held our first virtual happy hour, which was pretty awesome. We had 30 of our staff members participate, which was great to connect. But it also, I think it's important to remember that few, if any, of our teachers had done any use of a virtual platform like Zoom or Google Meet. And so they are right with everybody on the board who's learning how to do this, except the pressure of having 20 students in front of you who think that you know how to do this perfectly. And so for the teachers who had not tried it, the happy hour was a great way to, I was like, press the buttons, do anything you want to do right now to learn how to navigate this platform. And I think we'll see more and more teachers using that. We are significantly concerned about our seniors, which I really appreciate the addition to the agenda because I can bring that up later in the meeting.
Thank you. Okay, and then the last thing I just want to remind the board of is that, the governor's announcement this week that she's having schools remain closed until May 4th. So that will extend our remote learning period until then, if not longer. And that concludes the update, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
So Jen, just so you know, next time we're going to start with you and go the other way so they don't say all the things you want to say before we get to you, just to be fair. And I just want to say, I'm sure those kindergarten parents loved a baggie of glitter coming home. I'm sure that was a big hit. Okay, so, okay, Valley.
Thank you for all those reports that were super helpful. And I have to concur that everything I'm hearing is that the staff has been amazing and they're just working 10 shifts where they used to work one. So I just want to thank everyone in all the schools for the amazing work that they're doing. And especially the edtechs. We tend not to hear much about what they're contributing, but in talking to parents who teach at the schools, they, especially in the special ed department, where a special ed teacher used to be able to help out 8 students in one classroom, and now they need to individually reach out to every student. They can't possibly do that. The day is not long enough. So they have been relying on edtechs. We're actually doing the work of the teacher too. So, so please thank them when you see them, because they're doing a great job. I had a question, and this is following up to what Jen was saying, and Lisa also touched on it about individualized learning plans. I do hear from the community, parents are commenting that the way students are receiving this model is, it varies a lot from kids who are getting bored to kids who are completely overwhelmed. And I had a question about the flexibility that the school has in terms of individualizing the learning, not just for special ed students, but for any students, that they will be able to go through this, however long it takes, this phase in their learning, and still come out at the other end with confidence that they are good students, good learners, and they can do the work. I'm hearing reports from parents who have kids who are students who used to be high achievers, and they're really not doing well right now. And one parent even asked me, is there any way that this student can graduate with fewer credits, or whether this student can finish the year maybe doing the basic in each course, but not necessarily do all of the assignments. So I wanted to hear from the principals if there's has been any conversation about individualizing the learning more, not just in terms of the reaching out to the students, but the demands placed on the students and what that means for them to move on to the next year or graduate.
So I know that Ray, you spoke to me about some, I don't want to get into graduation because that's the adjustment to the agenda, but for the just overall question that Valley's asking about the ability to individualize, I know, Ray, that you can speak to that with a couple of your parents that have reached out to you.
Yeah, and I think Valley, you're exactly right. And those are the things that teachers notice just walking around the room, and they make modifications, they do different things. And that's really what we're kind of learning in this online world. How do we reach out and find that? Because it's a little harder to find than just walking around the room. But we have definitely modified the workload for some kids as needed. I've had some parents reach out to me and said, hey, I want to do this science with my kid while I'm out, so we can be outside and do that. And we see how that lines up to what we're doing, and we have let them do that. I have another kid doing an electrical internship, and we've allowed that to happen. So we're definitely would love to make plans with parents and make the modifications, as needed, moving forward with that. But I think it is, finding that out, because it's not as easy to find out as it is in a regular classroom.
If any other principal wants to talk to that, if you'll just raise your hand, we'll call on you.
I saw Emily's hand go up.
Okay, great, thanks.
I think it's one of the reasons. So pre-K 5, we've prioritized one-on-one conferring between kids and teachers. I was having a virtual evening with friends this weekend who have kids in other Cumberland County districts, and they were surprised. That was the one area that our model was different than the model their kids are experiencing. And to me, that piece is really essential to do exactly what you're digging into, Bali. And that's the opportunity for kids to meet with their teachers so that the teacher has a better sense at, like, to get at what Ray's saying, which is when you're not in the classroom with the student. And so I think, you know, given that we're in day 3 now of Google Classroom, I think those models are just beginning to happen. I see examples, for example, my own student had a math assignment, but then there was an optional additional assignment if students wanted to extend the work. But I think those one-on-one conferring meetings each week are going to be the opportunity where kids go deeper or do more, or alternatively, where a teacher and a student, sometimes in collaboration with the parent, depending on the age of the student, are prioritizing what does get done. And I think that piece is really essential to the model that you're asking about.
Okay, thank you. Kate.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I hit rename by mistake. I have a question about communication and what the plan is for, maybe it's a communication coming from the board or from Becky about the learning plan. I know we've gotten individual messages from each administrator for the schools our kids are in, but like just what you've all have explained today to us about the like what Julie was saying about the phase 1 and the phase 2, that's not something that I had picked up on that we were doing. And so I didn't know if there was a way coming out of this meeting that we can get a communication out that lays at that just the high level points of the plan, but also explains the constraints we're working under here in terms of, you know, the executive order. We can't lay off staff, so we need to use this resources that we have now to give the best opportunity for learning now. And then also if there's a way to explain some of the things Becky had mentioned earlier when in her presentation about just the things you looked at and why this is why we feel this is the best option for students.
I'm happy to do that. I've been trying to send out like a weekly communication, just, you know, to update our staff and our families. And I would be happy to include that tomorrow. And then, you know, the key points, then the principals can also push out in their communication. So thanks for that idea.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Kate that, you know, I think something coming from you as the leader so that people know that this is not just Moore Street or it's not just Pownell or Durham, it's this is the plan that we're rolling out in all of the schools and all the district. I mean, some parents have kids in multiple schools, so they know they're seeing some of that consistency, but I think it would be, I think it could go a long way to helping people in the community realize that this is a well thought out plan. We have considered all of these other options, and this is the best road forward, we think, and here's why. So I think that would be a great use of one of your communications. Maddie.
Boy, I wish we had a Facebook page. I can't help myself. If we could have like a briefer version of what we just got from all of the building admins, just a video snapshot and a message from you that went out. I mean, I think that would be wonderful community building.
Kate.
My daughter's taking my taco order. I had a follow-up question. I don't want to like jump in if other people had comments on the communication piece. I can wait.
I don't see any other hands up at the moment.
Okay. The other question I just wanted to be sure was whether when you all were discussing this with administrators, the plan that is before us, is there comfort level that long-term, if we are out, which I think may be likely till the end of the school year, is this the plan we would stick with, or do you envision maybe having to adjust? I mean, obviously you have to tweak every week as you learn new things. But do you envision there being any significant change to what we're doing now if we have to do this till June 19th?
I think we will continue to get better, but I don't see a significant change. But I will say, when I look at just 2 weeks ago, I feel like things have changed a lot in 2 weeks. So it's hard to predict, but overall, I just see us tweaking this model and getting better with it.
Will.
I would just add to that, Kate, that as you sort of heard a little bit earlier, because we sort of span all the ranges, I can say that we've worked very closely with the pre-K 5 schools, all 4 schools, to make sure that this next phase that we just sort of entered is one that we could grow with right through if necessary. So that's why we went with one platform. There's lots of options, but the team really made some thoughtful decisions about having the structure that we could then learn about and build our understanding with, and that would have enough capacity to grow with us. And likewise, I benefit from working with Ray and Connor, Kelly and I do. And in that structure also, we really looked at how can we grow within that one model without having to recreate something else. So I think we've all tried to think quite strategically about a structure and a platform that will allow us to refine and grow and not have to recreate.
Thanks, Will. Vali?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back around to the original question I had, and specifically at the high school, Jen, because we have a minimum number of credits that are required in each grade, and then there are also requirements to take classes at the following level. I'm wondering how much flexibility you guys have to basically set different levels of achievement for different students as needed, so they can do work along the lines of what Ray and Emily were describing and still get the credits that they need. Is that something that is possible at the high school?
We can see that. Let me see if I understand your question, because talking about credits required is that addition to the board agenda tonight. But
Okay.
I think you're asking if a student, say a 9th grader, if we're reducing what they're doing, are they still able to get the credit? Absolutely. I mean, we work with
Okay.
individual teachers, and what we've been talking a lot about for all students is, we kind of, I've described it many times in terms of these circles, where I say, this is the essential knowledge. This is what kids have to know. This is what's good to know. And this is what's nice to know. And, we hope that teachers normally do all 3 of those, and I said, we're operating right here in have to know right now. And then those good to know and nice to know will be some of our enrichment opportunities or optional things that we're providing. But really, we need to make sure that we've got that essential knowledge, so that we say, because a lot of our content area classes build on one another, we need to know that kids are leaving Algebra 1 with the required skills and knowledge that will make them successful in the next level of math. And so we have to be mindful of that and when we're reducing what we're asking all students to do, and maybe even further reductions for kids who have health challenges or mental health challenges or particular situations in their family, we still have to make sure that they are leaving that class with those essential skills and knowledge. It's not an easy task to do, but it's something that we're talking about right now constantly with all of the teachers.
So is what the teachers are now posting on Google Classroom the must know, the inner circle?
I think they're still working on that. I mean, that's always and in normal circumstances, teachers are saying what we often see is that have to know circle just keeps growing, right? And we're adding not just content knowledge, but skills knowledge to that. And we're saying you need all of this. And so I think right now in these circumstances, they're trying to figure out, what can they look at as essential skills and knowledge, but it's not an easy task, and I think that we're going to see a lot of teachers are working on that in the weeks to come.
Thank you.
I saw Jen's hand was up for a second, but then went down. Are you good, or did you have a comment?
Me, Jen?
Yes, sorry.
The only thing I wanted to add was that just that I was involved in that president, vice president of the school boards. It was a Zoom meeting. I think it was yesterday. The days are all like running together. But there was like 100 people on there that was presidents and vice presidents of school boards. And just all I wanted to really say was that, I mean, RSU 5 seems to be like head and shoulders above what's going on in the rest of the state. And I just think it's important to let everybody know, with even all these questions and kind of moving, to make things better, like what we're already doing is really just amazing compared to what, and like Jen Gulko said earlier, not disrespectful to other districts, but I mean, some districts still are just like at the phase of even trying to figure out how to have a meeting, and I, of course, in the chat was like, oh, we already had one last week. It was perfect. Like, we're having one this week. So, just to let everyone know that, if there's any feeling of like that we're kind of behind, we are we're way ahead of the curve. So I just wanted to share that.
Thanks, Jen. Lindsay.
Yeah, I would just echo what Jen just said. I was on a Zoom call with 3 girlfriends last night, one in LA. I'm presuming based on how she lives her life and her house that I got to spy on, that it's in an affluent public school community and one in a very affluent community down in Massachusetts. And both these moms are going bananas because nothing's up and running. There's no teacher check-ins at this point. And I have to tell you guys, I was so proud of our little RSU 5, our little community, and what is being turned out already. Hearing from these kind of highfalutin public school towns that are really struggling and driving their parents, the parents are struggling. So good on everyone. Hang in there. And I think it's only going to get better. I think the lift is probably beyond huge for our teachers and administrators. But I just wanted to echo that and let you know that as I sat on this call, my little country house, I felt pretty darn good about what we're providing for our kiddos. So well done.
Okay. So I don't see any other hands up. So I'm going to take that as we are ready to take action on this. So I would take a motion for consideration and approval of the RSU 5 distance learning plan. I saw Maddie with the first and Vali with the second. And look at me, I haven't lost my sheet yet with everybody's name on it. Okay, so we have a first and we have a second on the floor, and I'm going to call the roll for the vote. Kate?
Yes.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Candy?
Yes.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Yes.
Jen,
Yes.
Susanna,
Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
Mara.
Yes.
I vote yes. Vali,
Yes.
Maddie,
Yes.
and Liam.
Yes.
Liam, did you wear a tie just for us, or is this what you like learn in at home?
No, I didn't wear it just for you guys, but had worked before.
Well, good.
Sorry. Next time I will.
Okay. All right. So that is 12A. So 12B is the discussion about the request from the Meeting House Arts Project.
So Michelle and I met with Ed and Jane Bradley. I don't know. It was before Corona. I'll say that. From ACAF. Jane is the president of that group. And they are, as you heard from the person who spoke during the public comment session or section, that they're requesting support from the RSU. The project is to renovate the First Parish Church on Main Street in Freeport. And when complete, this will be a visual arts gallery and a 200-seat theater and performance space that our kids will be able to utilize. One of the things that I think is super exciting is that it would be a place that they could display their art. And of course, we have art displayed in our schools, but it's just, I think, extra special when it can be somewhere outside of the building where other people are seeing their art on a regular basis. The group is requesting a donation of $5,000, but both Jane and Ed signaled to us that they would be thrilled with any amount because it would just show that the RSU is in the support of this project. So I kind of put that forth for your consideration. And I would, I'm sorry. And I would just recommend that we probably would want to take it out of this year's budget if you decide to make a donation.
Maddie.
I just wanted to make sure everyone knows that I'm recusing myself from the discussion and from the vote because I do sit on that board.
Thank you, Maddie. Okay, so so I thought it was a great discussion with Ed and Jane, with Becky and I, BC, and I do think it's a really interesting project. I think there's some opportunities there. One of the things that, you know, sort of stuck out to me as an opportunity with this program is really one of the things we've struggled with, I think, over the years is GATE for our music and our art kids and providing additional opportunities for them. And I think this might be an avenue that could help us with that. So that was kind of interesting to me. And I do think I agree with Becky that the ability to display art in a place other than, you know, just the schools. Now, it's not great to have it up in the schools, but it's kind of a, you know, even fancier to get to see it in a public gallery space. So, you know, I think Becky did a good layout of what the project is, what their request is for. They did say that, you know, any donation is much appreciated, and, you know, financial support from the RSU does go a long way in just showing that we're kind of all in this project together for our communities. And then the other thing that Becky and I had talked with them about was, are there other ways we could support their project? You know, access to families in terms of making sure they're familiar with the project when they're doing individual fundraising opportunities and things like that. So, you know, there might be some creative ways we can support them non-financially, but obviously their first goal is to see if we can include some level of support for them. So just love to hear what folks are thinking. And I do think Becky's idea about funding it out of this year's budget probably makes the most sense, because we should have, you know, we expect we'll have some excess that we could use for something like this. So.
Susanna had her hand up and it went down.
So Susanna's hand was up and then went down. I don't know if she meant to put it down or changed her mind.
Yeah, no, I wanted to say that Firstly, I'm in a lot of support for the ACAF and would love to see us doing something. My question had been, I missed a word of when Becky was speaking about whether that would come from this year's budget or not. So I wanted clarification on that, and then you answered that question. But I will say while here that, yeah, big support for it and have been supporting it recently or over the past couple of years since it got going. And also, yeah, interested in not just, I realize the importance of the financial contribution now, but also other ways that we can support. I think that's really exciting to investigate. So.
Thanks. Vali?
So Michelle, for the new board members, could you please explain when the money gets taken out of this budget? Because we have remaining funds from contingency or whatever we have. It can be either used now or it can be folded into undesignated fund balance. And can you explain what would happen to that money if we didn't use it for this project?
Sure.
And what are the uses that we normally allocate those extra funds to?
Okay, so how the rules work from an accounting perspective for our budget is the amount we raise at the annual budget meeting every year is how much that we have, we collect, whether it's from taxes or from the towns, and we spend that over the course of the year. Now, obviously, during a budgeting process, we make some assumptions about wages levels and costs of insurance and utilities and all those things that we have to make assumptions on. We have to be very careful to not under budget because we are limited by law of how much we can spend based on that vote we do every year. So we include, we have a contingency number that we carry every year, and that's the number we talk about when, we have conversations like if there's a spike in kids and we need to add a teacher, where does that money come from, right? So we can fund that out of contingency. We try actually not to touch that contingency number, and for knock on wood, the past several years, we've been successful in that, and we've been able to roll that contingency forward each year to offset taxes in the following year. But even setting aside the contingency number, we typically will have money that we have allocated through our budgeting process and raised through taxes and through the state that we don't end up spending by June 30th. And the rules are very clear that any funds, we can spend those funds up until that time, June 30th, but we can't sort of prepay things. We can only pay for things that are bought and paid for and received by June 30th. So we've done things, some of the items for Dennis's budget, right? We'll have $10,000 or $15,000 left at the end of the year, and he's able to buy, I don't want to say a boiler because that's probably more expensive than that. He's laughing at me now, but he can do some of his projects, some of his smaller projects out of funds that we have already collected, already budgeted for, so that they don't end up in upcoming year's budgets. If we chose not to do that, any excess that we had raised through the year and not spent gets what's put into what's called the undesignated fund balance. So that's sort of our savings account, right? So it's money we thought we were going to spend or need, but we didn't. So that's the amount that rolls forward into that undesignated fund balance. And if we ever want to access those funds, that's actually a vote at the 3-town meeting. So you'll see our conversation tonight, we're going to talk about use of the undesignated fund balance to offset taxation for the upcoming budget year. So those are funds that we had raised in prior years that we didn't spend, or funds that we will not end up spending this year because of the shutdown or a variety of other things. Is that a fair explanation?
Yes, very good. Thank you.
Jen.
So I wanted to follow up that explanation with the number. How much money do you guys project we will have unspent by June 30th that would roll into undesignated fund balance to offset taxes for next year?
I
know what that
don't,
number is?
No, we don't know that number yet. I did talk to Ann today, and she plans on doing that within the next couple of days. What we do know is that number, and I may have to call on her to refresh my memory about what it would be if we remained shut down, but we don't really know that right now. We know that if we go, we're going to be pretty much learning remotely through April, and I think that number was somewhere around 160,000. But we have not done the forecast for where we're going to end up.
I just want to clarify that what Becky just said, a question that hopefully Ann can clarify. So that 160 number that she had provided to us last year or last week, that was the number I remember as well. If we stayed shut just for that through April 27th, which we know is now at least a week longer than that. Was that 160 specific to the shutdown period, or was that all of our savings to date plus that shutdown? Do you know?
I think I want Ann to weigh in, because I think she was really looking at specific areas that would directed her to around spring sports, transportation, subs. But that's probably most of it. But Ann, are you there?
I am. Yeah, that's right. It was all stuff that we knew we're going to be saving on because of schools not being in session, like fuel costs, overtime costs that are typical, and sub costs, and the sports. Those are the main things.
Okay. So any other savings that we have been able to accrue through the year, turnover savings, all those things, it didn't include those. So there's likely more than 160, but that's kind of the shutdown savings, if you will.
Yes.
Okay. Jen.
I just had a question about the actual space where, you know, you mentioned that the possibility to have like student artwork. What about the actual space? Like it's like 200 seating. I don't know if Maddie, I mean, no, you don't want to be part of the discussion, Maddie, but I don't know if you can answer the question about, would that be a usable space for the community or for the schools to use, like for different venues, or what's going on with that?
So they have assured us that we would have use of that for our students, the 200 seating, and I think even our community programs is hopeful to use the space for some of the offerings that they do through, adult enrichment.
Yeah, I think that's, I was just going to say, I think that seems like a bargain in terms of, making that donation towards the renovation and then having all of that ability to use the space and have that as a space for our students to display artwork. So, I mean, I know we're going to vote on it, but just as a kind of thought, I think it's a really seems like a small amount of money to get that in return. So I think that I'd be very supportive of that.
And I'm not sure what, the way that this will function for them as a nonprofit. They will typically be leasing out the space for people to use. They have expressed to us a willingness to, put together a MOU that makes sense, right? So as a partnership between, as a stakeholder for their projects and, to try and make sure that we do have some access. And my understanding, they had some drawings of what it's going to look like, and sort of the main part of the church will be what is converted into the theater, and then there's a portion to the left which would be more of the art gallery. And so it does look like really, really interesting space. Beth.
I was just going to explain what you just said, Michelle, about how the 200 seat space was in the main part. I took a tour of it when they had an open house, and it was really interesting to see their envisioning. So you could walk through the space, see where the art gallery would be, and then see where the performance area would be. And it was really a neat time to check it out. I just had a question about the undesignated fund balance in this paper on page 9. It has the undesignated fund balance. It says at the bottom 2019-2020 it's 400,000, and then 2020-2021 is 160. So does that mean that's what the current balance is, or is that what's in the budget that we're putting forward into the undesignated fund?
Okay, so neither of those things. So the current balance, according to the audit, is 649,000 and change. So we'll call it 650,000. If you guys will recall, we were at close to $1 million in our undesignated fund balance, but then with the issue with the warrants last year, we had to use 330 something thousand to send back to the towns. So that dropped us down to the 650 that we have today. So what you're seeing on that page 9 of the budget document is the how much of the undesignated fund balance we used in the current year, so 400,000, and how much we're proposing to use to offset taxation next year.
Can I follow up? I just have, so when you're looking at that 1920 year and it's 400,000, so you're saying you would have brought it down to 250 and then another 160 out of that? No.
Nope. So that the current balance of 650,000 already takes into account the 400 that we used in the current year. Yeah. So if we did the 160, our expectation is that that 160 actually isn't going to really eat into that 650,000 because we think we're going to roll forward at least 160 from the closure from this year. But, you know, Becky and I had a conversation about this and, you know, just the general conservative nature of, you know, we should really be making assumptions of use of the undesignated fund balance. You know, the worst case scenario is that we don't have any savings this year. And are we comfortable if we use 160,000 that it does drop us down to $500,000 in our quote unquote savings account? So if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much for helping me clear that up. And I also just wanted to say that I also would be in favor of supporting them with a $5,000 donation.
Valley was next. And I'm sorry if I'm grabbing people out of order.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Anne and anybody else of the directors or administrators who can help out. Of the $254,000 that we did not include in the budget last week, that we had the audit for the energy audit and the transportation and the tennis court contribution to the fund, some technology, all those items that we decided not to include in the next year's budget. How many of those could be funded with this year's budget? I mean, could we, Dennis, for example, say we would be able to pay a consultant before June 30th to do the audit, or any of the other things that we needed? Could we contribute to the tennis court fund with this year's budget? So I'd like to know what we anticipate that we could fund from this year's budget for the things that we decided not to fund in next year's budget.
I think, do you want to?
Well, I'll take a stab. The energy audit, I would have Dennis weigh in on once I'm finished talking. I don't know whether, I think so much of it is just going to depend on this coronavirus when it goes away. And I know he has had some discussions, so, you know, I'll have him talk about that. I don't think we can do the tennis reserve account because I think that has to be a board or I'll look to Ann for this, but I think that has to be a vote to set up the reserve account. So I don't think we could do that out of this year's budget.
And I think the other issue with the tennis courts, if I'm recalling correctly, I'm going back to the conversation we had on the high school funds that we had to use by a certain date. And they specifically said, used by a certain date cannot be put into a reserve. Like, I think we could, if we wanted to repave we could do that out of this year's budget, as long as it could be actually physically done by June 30th. They seem very particular about that, because I remember when we were doing the track and field and we were funding some out of one year's budget, and then the rest was coming in the following year. We literally couldn't fund things out of this year's budget unless it was on site on June 30th. We couldn't just buy it in anticipation of it coming in July or August, had to be here by June 30th. So.
Anne, do you have anything you want to add about the reserve account?
Well, I'm not savvy about when votes need to be taken and things like that, so I can't really speak to that. But I think Michelle's point is the most important. All the things that we would want to buy that are, stuff or services, it would have to all be done before June 30th. It's just my main thought.
And the reason that I'm saying I thought the vote was needed is because that's what happened with the track and field. We voted it on that at the annual budget meeting, and then the money then was put into that account.
Okay, so
that's where I think that gets a little bit confusing, but we could seek clarification on that. The buses, we can't do that out of this year's budget because we need to be approved by the state. I mean, we could do it, but then we wouldn't get any reimbursement. So I just don't think our fleet's in a place where I would suggest that with the economy as it is. The classroom furniture, any needs there, we definitely could use the renovation fund, which is why Jen Gulko and I felt comfortable removing that 9,000. The technology, that's an interesting question, Valley, because I think that we could take that out of this year's budget if once I'm more confident in the number. So if there's a need there and we feel that we really do have savings at the end of the year, which I predict that I think we will, we might look at purchasing some needed equipment there. The athletic lines, I remember those being various things that really, I don't feel, those were like some stipends, so we couldn't do those out of this year's budget. I'll go back to Dennis to just weigh in on the energy audit.
So I haven't had much of a chance to meet some of our engineers of the companies that do that kind of work. People are sick, people are not venturing out. I do have an appointment to meet with somebody from Mechanical Services next week to talk about the energy audit and to see what they can come up with. So it's really, I've got to get my head around what exactly it is we want them to do. I mean, we don't just want them to do energy, we want them to do a whole comprehensive thing. So it's going to take some time to sit down with somebody and hash out what we want in the document moving forward, and what cost, if there's any. There may not be any cost, but I mean, it's too far out there right now. We're still working on it, and it's just too hard to meet with people right now. It's almost impossible.
And I would say that if we would need to somehow pay for it this year, so the audit would need to be almost complete by July 1st in order for that to happen. So I just don't know how realistic that is yet.
So is there any news on whether money that we have leftover savings from this year's budget can be applied to offset next year's budget, even if we don't include it with today's vote? So there was a question last week about the possibility of adding on the floor additional offset, basically to minimize the impact of the taxes on June 9.
I think that I know Michelle and I had a discussion around that, and I think she's clearer with it than I am. But I think is, to me, what you have is $649,000 that's in the audited unexpended fund balance. We know that that money is in the bank. And so to me, it's about how low do you want to go with that money, not around the savings for this year, because until that audit is complete, I don't trust the number. We know there's going to be savings, but how much, I would hate for you to be using our prediction to make a motion on the floor. So to me, it really is about how comfortable is the board? How low are they willing to go with the 650,000?
Kate.
I was just gonna add a little bit about the undesignated fund balance and reserve fund. So for the tennis court reserve fund, what we had in the budget for next year actually doesn't go into the undesignated fund balance or into the reserve fund until it falls into undesignated fund next June, 2021. So that's how the reserve fund works. And then you would vote next June to place what was the $35,000 into the reserve fund. So this year in June, we'll be voting to place what we voted 2 years ago to place into capital reserve funds. So at the annual budget meeting, you know, we'll vote on a warrant article that says place X amount of dollars into the reserve fund. That's actually money that fell into the reserve at the end of last year. The other thing is, I had a question about the undesignated fund balance. The 649,000, is that takes into account the 375,000 that we paid mid-year?
Yes.
To the towns? Okay, so the 400,000 that shows under 1920 use of undesignated fund, we actually used 775,000 in undesignated fund balance this year. Is that correct?
I kind of agree with that, because we ended up, because of the error, they took error out of
revenue.
Our undesignated fund balance, we thought was, and this is why it's dangerous to go on what you think until the audit's completed. We thought it was going to be $1 million.
Right.
After using the 400,000.
Yes.
But because there was the error, we ended up, you're right, Kate, using like 700 and something.
You muted yourself.
Me?
Sorry.
No.
Me. I did. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure that folks understood that that $400,000 on page 9, what we ended up really using was 775,000 in undesignated fund in this year. So, but that doesn't change the $649,000 number. Okay, so that's what we think that's what we know is in there right now. So our audit captured. Okay, this is my question. How did the audit capture that amount that we used this year?
Because we overtaxed. So according to what the warrant said we were allowed to collect, we collected $361,000 too much. So they said, no, you can't include that in your revenues. You have to fund that through shared revenues, i.e. the undesignated fund balance.
And Anne, can you weigh in on kind of how that was captured in the audit?
Yes.
I think that's her question.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
I think it was recorded as like a special item expense, actually.
Wouldn't it have just been a lower revenue?
I don't think it was revenue. I believe it was recorded through expense, although how that ripples through. I can
We
spend
can,
it poking around, but
I don't, it's a fine. I just want to make sure that the number 649,000 that we're pulling out of the audit absolutely accounts for the 300 and
it does.
it does. It
All right.
absolutely does.
I'm
Okay.
100% certain.
Okay. Okay.
Jeremy.
Are we still on the ACAP discussion?
And yes, / the undesignated fund balance discussion. Yes.
Cool. I definitely support it also. Just want to make sure, have there been any discussions around, because as I understand it, First Parish continues as an active UCC church. And have there been any discussions around students that aren't comfortable with churches or are in religions that wouldn't allow entry into other houses of worship, if that came up as any concerns, either as part of ACAP in general or specific to the RSU use of it?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I know that the church is maintaining their offices downstairs. And I think they will be one of the users of the theater space as well. I'm not sure.
And I feel like I'm looking for the drawing, and I'm not sure, that it's not really when they get it renovated.
I think it definitely looks more like a theater than a church when they're
I don't
done.
know. Can you see that? Yeah, I think it's going to be looking more like a theater, that then when they have church, they'll transition it more into kind of a place of worship. So that's my understanding, but we haven't really talked about wonder if somebody wasn't comfortable with having their art hung into a place of worship. I don't foresee that as a problem because, even on field trips when we've taken kids to Boston, you might go into churches as pieces of works of art. It's not as if while we are in there, it's going to be, a Sunday service. So I just really see it as, I guess I don't think of it as a church when the art is being displayed, if that makes sense or not.
Yep.
Maddie?
Would it be helpful for me to answer that question, or I don't think this will sway anybody one way or the other, but I hope not. ACAF did have lengthy discussion, has had lengthy discussion throughout this whole process with regard to our relationship with the church, leasing from the church, and would there ever be any conflict in terms of material that would be presented either in the gallery space or in the theater space, and has been assured that that would never be the case. So ACAF is free to be an artistic entity with free reign.
That's right. I feel like I recall part of his conversation. He said, we asked them if we could do the Book of Mormon there, and they said yes. Valley.
Maddie just answered my question. I wanted to make sure that the church will be comfortable with any material that would be displayed at their building. Thank you.
Kate.
What can you say again what the dollar amount is that they're asking for? And then can you also, Michelle, can you give a little bit more information on how they said this would help the GATE music program?
So their request was $5,000. And I don't know if there's immediate opportunities. They were just sort of talking through some of the programming that they're looking to get in place. One of them is, they have access through their membership and outreach to a lot of local musicians that are interested in, really working closely with students that are serious about their instruments. You know, they had a couple examples of those types of folks in the area, and you know, they're envisioning the ability to you know, partner or pair up those, you know, professional musicians with students that show a affinity and a high level of aptitude. You know, they didn't say gate, but that was sort of the first thing that came to my mind as, you know, one of the areas that we have consistently said, you know, we have this process and we identify, and then we've always sort of struggled with how to differentiate and provide enrichment opportunities. And you know, given their access to people in those types of roles, that it seemed like it might be a good fit.
They talked a little bit about like, because it's going to be a smaller venue, around 200, that it would be good for workshops for musicians, or the smaller groups like a jazz ensemble or something like that.
Okay, I don't see any other hands. Nope. Ginny says no hands. So I will take no hands as people are ready to move forward. So I would take a motion for approval of the RSU support. Can I amend this to include the dollar amount? The consideration and approval of the RSU support for the Meeting House Arts Project in the amount of $5,000. Valley, second from
First, second.
Oh. I didn't see your hand. Okay, Beth first, Valley second. Any other questions? Do you have a question, Valley? Okay.
Yeah, I also wanted to encourage community programs to continue to support ACAF the way they have been until this moment. And I just want to make sure that everybody knows that Peter has been amazing. He's been basically publicizing the programs that are offered through ACAF, through community programs, and I would like to make sure that that partnership continues, because I think there's a great synergy there. And especially if we want more programming for kids, it's great for community programs to be working really closely with ACAF so that we ensure that our interests and the interests of our kids are at the forefront of what ACAF is doing.
Agreed. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor and a second. So I will go through the roll call. Kate.
Yes.
Jeremy.
Yes.
Candy.
Yes.
Lindsay.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Susanna.
Yes.
Beth.
Yes.
Mara.
Yes.
I'm voting yes. Vali.
Yes.
Maddie. Oh,
Not voting.
abstain. Sorry, I'm just going through my list. Sorry. And Liam. Did we lose Liam? Okay. All right, so that passes. Thank you. Okay. C, unfinished business, the RSU 5 cost sharing consultant discussion. I think Susanna was the one who requested that we put this on the agenda, so I will give the floor to her to start our conversation.
Yeah, basically just interested in having the discussion about the role of the consultant, assuming that we want to go forward with the consultant, what that person would be doing, our expectations, what we want to get out of the cost sharing, what we want to get out from the consultant, clarification of our expectations, and whether that gets into issues that we've been having, whether that gets into discussing the options that we've come up with thus far, or whether we withhold those to give a little bit more of a clean slate, and what materials we put forward and what we want to get back. That's basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you see any hands up yet? No? So I would be open to hearing what people are thinking about in those sort of areas around the use of the consultant. I will say that our plan was to meet with them in May, right? Because the gentleman, I think it was a gentleman, that was sort of top on our list, was not available till May. Hopefully that's still a feasible timeline, but that will obviously depend on the status of the world. But
So I will just chime in there. I had some email discussion with him today just to say that we wanted to meet with him. He's currently down in Florida. And so their plan is to come back, I think, mid-May or so, and then he'll have to self-quarantine for 2 weeks. So it may be closer to June, although that would not prevent us from having some type of Zoom meeting with him. And we're getting really good at those.
Valley.
Yeah, I would like to hear opinions from the board in terms of how much direction the board will give to this person. I want to make sure that we use the time of this person effectively, and also that we, the board, retain basically control of the work that we assign to this person. So I see this consultant more as someone who will respond to the request of the board to do X, Y, or Z. And I just wanted to see if other people feel the same way, or how others are envisioning this partnership going moving forward.
Maddie.
So I went back to the email that I sent, because I'm the one who started this. Interesting to read my own writing and be like, what did I mean? I think my intention was twofold. And one was a response to the heavy workload that clearly the finance committee is under. And, you know, I sort of raised it as a question, like, is this normal? It seems like this one committee is working so hard. And the other was just a reflection on our board discussions where, I mean, it's complex enough. The math is super complex. Sorry, I just lost my train. And we can get into sort of he said. Can you hear me? Just weird things popping up on my screen. Sorry. Misunderstandings or miscommunication about spreadsheets. You know, what one person is doing one spreadsheet, someone else is doing another spreadsheet. You know, there's disagreement about which numbers are accurate. And that's just not a great look for us as an organization to our community. And so my desire was really to bring in someone, I mean, knowing that it can't always be Anne. Anne's new in her role and already doing so much. We look to her for a lot, but would it be helpful to have somebody at our meetings who can answer our questions with Anne also, and run the numbers that we're asking for when we ask for something, because I think it will not only help us in our discussions with one another have greater perceived transparency in our deliberations, but it will also help our communities who are watching us deliberate on this really important topic, and help them feel that we're having a conversation that they can trust. I hope that makes sense.
I think it does. So no other hands up. Anyone else want to share what they would like to? Oh, Susanna and Mara.
Yeah, just a question. I don't remember whether this has been decided or not, because you've mentioned meeting with somebody who's currently in Florida, but has the consultant been identified? I know we've spoken about several individuals. I just didn't know if we'd settled on one person.
We haven't yet, because we haven't had an opportunity to meet with any yet. So
okay, because that would be another
identified. Yep.
question about the relationship with that person and the district, and whether we want somebody who's familiar with RSU5, lives in one of the towns, or whether we want somebody who's in school cost sharing elsewhere, or somebody who's how neutral do we want somebody, and what the impacts of that are.
I think the folks that have been identified are all people that are extremely involved with school finance and how the numbers and math works. I don't think any of them live in the district. Is that right, Becky? Do you know?
Really, I only have 2 currently, because I think one that Ann was thinking about, and he's not willing to do it. Is that correct? Ann, I'm looking to you for like a nod of a yes or a no.
Is she on? Oh, there she is. Yep. She's unmuted.
There we go. Yes, sorry, I was nodding. Yes, he decided he was not interested.
So currently there are 2 people that Maine School Management have given to me as possibilities, and I've reached out to one of them because he hasn't accepted. He has said that he's interested and willing to meet. But the reason I reached out to him is he has extensive knowledge in school finance, and he has done this sort of thing for other districts. I don't know him personally. If he walked in the room right now, I'm not sure I'd recognize him, because most of my communication has been over email.
Mara.
I'm having 2 thoughts. I guess I was making some assumptions about what we were going to ask this person to do. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. So one question I have is, will this person also be acting as a facilitator, and will we be revisiting some of the discussions we had around fairness? And then my other, or whatever, could be any assumption that we may have made during the process or any discussion we had. And then my other question, or my other thought was, I guess I had been making the assumption that this person would potentially put forward, like we had 3 options already, right? And I guess I had been making the assumption that perhaps this person might help us re-examine those, or maybe even come up with a new 4th option, or something like that.
I think, I mean, at this point, everything is on the table. We haven't met with them yet. So, I mean, we can craft the role how we feel like it's going to benefit us the best. Beth.
I just had one small thing to say as far as should they live in or out of the district, and I feel it's important. I know that the people that you're talking to don't live in district, is if I understood that correctly. Yeah, okay. I feel like that's important, because if we're really looking for somebody to be, non-biased or anything, that they don't have a stake in this game at all.
Valley.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also think it would be helpful for whoever the person happens to be to know what kind of outcome we want, not in terms of what kind of formula we want, but what is our definition of fairness, so that person can go with collective understanding from the board and the consultant of what the job is. So to the extent that we can have a conversation before we involve this person and decide this is the job and this is the level of communication we want, and also define who will communicate it with this person, I think we will be much better off in terms of having an outcome that everyone sees as objective, unbiased, reliable, and trustworthy.
Lindsay.
I don't have anything new to add or fresh to add to the discussion, but I kind of echo what everyone has already, what Beth, Mara, Susanna, Vali, Maddie have all said. And I do wonder how it will affect timeline of but we're in such an uncertain holding pattern right now anyway. So that's just one thing that's kind of percolating. Yeah.
Kate.
I think that if we direct this person on fairness, we're going to be tying their hands in options. We're going to be telling them that there's one way to arrive at a fair outcome. And I don't think we should be doing that if we want an objective opinion.
Yeah, Kate, you were talking about a completely different topic, but you had said a phrase that came to me in this discussion, which was, the cardinal rule of brainstorming is you let people provide all sorts of alternatives, and then we, provide feedback in terms of, okay, well, this one may work for us, this one probably doesn't because of this. But the idea of bringing in an unbiased, uninvolved person to the table, I think I would hate for us to lose the option of by tying their hands. I mean, the worst we say is, no, that's not what we're going to go with, but Vali.
Yeah, and I don't mean it to do it in a prescriptive way that ties their hands, but I think it's helpful for this person to know what we want out of this cooperation or relationship. And if we, the board, agree that, okay, fairness to us as a group means certain thing, that person should know what fairness looks like to us, because otherwise they just come back with a myriad of options, none of which fit our definition of fairness. And I see that as work that is not productive. So I want this process to be fair and unbiased, but I want it to be productive. So I don't want to reinvent the wheel and start with all kinds of options that don't fit our necessities necessarily. Obviously, we won't say we want one option that arrives at this number. We'll say, in general, this is what we are aiming for. Could you bring your creativity to us with a range of options that fit what we're looking for? I'm concerned about the time and the cost unless we define this job in a way that makes it productive.
Beth.
I just wanted to ask Kate how, if we wanted it to be fair, how is that tying their hands? I guess, could you just elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think asking them for it to be fair ties their hands. I think asking them to meet what we think is fair ties their hands, because first of all, I don't think the board has general agreement on what we think is fair. And then second of all, what the last directive that we were given by the board was that we thought it was fair for the total contribution to roughly equal the percent students. There's basically only one way to arrive at that exactly. And I don't think it's fair.
Susanna.
Yeah, I think I guess Kate may have just answered that a little bit, but echoing what's just been said about fairness, how we can identify guidelines to what we think is fair, and maybe things that we think are not fair, and structure it both positively and negatively in that sense. But maybe identify some key things that as a board we have some consensus or areas where we are getting that conflict within ourselves where we're running against that. But one of the values of having somebody who's not familiar with the district but is doing school finance elsewhere is seeing what they've been able to do in other cost sharing communities. So what has worked for other people? Where has the fairness come? And I think it's important that we're comfortable with the decision and that this does lead us in a way that brings greater consensus of fairness, but also I don't want to be defining fairness so much that we're then being restrictive. And so if we can hear what has worked elsewhere, that may be very helpful for us. And we may need to give that person a little bit more space. But I think it's still important that this doesn't drag on because we're being so loose in what we want. Right. So some guidelines about what's fair, maybe what's not fair, and then go from there.
I mean, the good news is anyone that we would consider as a viable candidate for this is not going to have the learning curve that Kate, Jeremy, and I have had, right, to get to where we are today. It's just different. So that's good. So that should, speed the process some. I think you're right. There needs to be some parameters around time and cost and deliverables. But I also think that, a little bit of space and rope, if you will, may come up with a solution that we hadn't thought of, right? And that's the whole point of this, is to try and come up with a solution that we can all be comfortable with, that we haven't thought of to date. Lindsay.
I think I was really just going to say what Susanna just said, and I think there has to be a little bit of trust granted to this person, and presumably this person will understand that we are struggling to do this ourselves. That said, time, cost, and parameters obviously matter. They need to know what they're working with, but if they have some history with this, they're going to know that we're calling them in because we're struggling, because we're three different towns with three very different ideas of what fairness looks like. But I do think we need to, if we're going to do this, there has to be some trust granted to this person with parameters and time and cost in consideration. But there's no point bringing someone in if we don't grant them a certain degree of trust that they can bring us something we may not have thought of, or that their background or ease with the numbers or the way that this whole thing is done, that they can bring us something new that we haven't thought of, that hasn't been brought to the table. Yeah.
Valley.
Yeah, I agree with that. Obviously, there needs to be some trust. Going back to how we make decisions, whether it's consensus or what it is, I mean, ideally, it would be consensus. There's some issues that we discussed that unfortunately we can't arrive at consensus. So I want everyone to recognize that we will try as best we can, but I don't think we need to wait to involve another person until we have consensus, because it will all basically be resolved by a vote of the board with 2/3 majority deciding what we do. I think when we talk about the parameters and things like that, we can't necessarily be held to the standard of consensus. If we can do it, that's great, but if we can't, then we just have to move forward with majority.
Susanna.
And I don't think we need consensus, as Michelle's echoed there. I mean, a moment ago, the point of this is to have somebody bring ideas that we haven't come up with yet ourselves. But big issues that are sticking points for some of us or all of us that we think is integral, that it's part of this, or integral that's not part of this, I think are valid.
Okay. Any other comments, questions on this front? I mean, I think, My thoughts on our next steps with this is, once we're able to nail down the time, whether virtually or in person, to meet with the first of the two, just sort of lay out, like Lindsay said, this is what we've struggled with so far. This is our goal. We would love if you could come to us with an idea or solution that everybody got on board with. It's probably not the reality, but that every person is going to love it. But we're open to other ideas. We're open to what's worked in other districts, and then we can start drilling into time, cost, what we expect them to provide to us. The pieces of the puzzle that Maddie had mentioned earlier, just sort of some confidence and transparency in having a third party who this is their livelihood, this is what they've always done, creating some of these models for us. So I think all those things can be rolled into the expectations. Kate.
I think also, Michelle, that maybe before we even meet with that person, we need to think about it differently. It sounds like the board wants to manage this person, so I don't think that the finance committee should be meeting with this person on our own, and if we do go that route, that maybe we need the board to approve like what plan we give this person as a facilitator. And so I don't feel comfortable meeting with that person prior to the board either signing off on the message we're supposed to be giving, or not us meeting as a finance committee, but the board interviewing that person.
Valley.
I suggest that we delegate the job of selecting the person to Becky and Anne, our superintendent and finance director, to select the candidate that they think would be best suited to do the job.
Anyone have thoughts on that piece? Yes, no? Okay. Becky, do you have an opinion on that?
No, I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
There's not 20 people out there dying to do this work, so I think it'll be a pretty easy process.
Okay. And then to Kate's question of, is this driven by meetings of the whole board with this person? I mean, we can certainly approach it that way, but I think if we have a concern about time and cost, that probably elevates it. But I could be wrong. Valley.
And maybe as the process rolls forward, the board can meet and make decisions, and those decisions can be communicated to the consultant through Becky or Anne also, just to facilitate that, so the consultant doesn't have to be charging to be sitting through our meetings necessarily. But once we arrive at a decision, that gets communicated through Becky or Anne as the point people in the district who communicate with the person. At least in the beginning. Obviously, when the person comes back with certain proposals, then we'll probably have questions, and we'll want to have that person at our meeting to explain and respond to questions. But to the extent that we can, if we can funnel the communication through Becky and Anne, I think that will be streamlining the process in a way that will be more productive and probably more cost.
I'm interested to hear from folks, whether the goal is to eliminate the finance committee from the conversation, I'm just thinking that the simplest way to share some of, if we want to backfill them on any of our, once they've started and are digging in and, want additional information. I mean, is the goal of the board to pull the finance committee out of this conversation? Maddie.
I don't think so. I mean, I think that this person is going to need context. And I think the finance committee is best able to provide that. But I do think it will help if this person sees superintendent and finance director as their point people instead of the committee as their point people.
Yep. Okay. All right. So now we will move to 12D, which is consideration and adoption of the superintendent's FY21 recommended budget.
I just have a couple of updates before you start deliberating on the proposed budget. We're still hopeful that we will have the annual budget meeting on May 27th. But, things keep changing. And so my best thinking right now, I know our plan this year was to have the annual budget meeting in Durham, but I think it might be better to have it at Freeport High School just because the gym is larger. And I just kind of predict that if we're able to have it, we're still going to be doing a lot of trying to put, 6 feet or more of physical distance between each one of us. And so the high school gym in Freeport is larger than the Durham. I had Dennis check on that. The Freeport High School gym has about 9,000 square feet versus the Durham gym having about 6,600 square feet. So is able to hold 750 versus 1,100 at the Freeport gym. So that's something I want you to think about. The other thing that I'm recommending tonight, in our initial budget timeline, you would have been signing the warrants if you adopt the budget at next week's meeting. And I feel like we want to make sure we get this right. I want the finance committee to check over the numbers to make sure the warrants align with the adopted budget. And so in order for Ann to have enough time to work with the attorney, she's working with Greg M., who is our moderator, and then have the finance committee look it over. I'm recommending that we wouldn't have the motions on the warrants until the April 29th board meeting and in discussions with Michelle. If you agree to that, we think we may even be able to eliminate the April 8th board meeting as a gift to all of you. And that's all I have for updates.
Okay, so Becky, what? Okay, hold on just a sec. So just so we know, the papers that we have in our package today include, as Beth pointed out, includes $160,000 use of the undesignated fund balance, the addition of the additional pre-K at Durham, and the elimination of the tier 1 items from last week. That's what's presented here.
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that we all knew what we were reviewing. Molly.
So it's just procedural question. Becky, how do we sign the warrants?
Yes, so what I will be requesting is that after the April 29th board meeting, that on the 30th, that we stagger you through the central office on Thursday.
It would also help us all sign on the right line because we'll be the only ones there.
And with black ink. And,
Yeah.
and I had another question. In the event, and I hope we don't go there, but in the event that we cannot have the annual budget meeting legally, is there any other way that we can approve the budget and not have to operate next year with this year's budget?
So there's a lot of discussion today at the superintendent's meeting that was discussed, and Eileen King, who is the executive director at MSMA, joins our meeting so she can take that back to Pender, the commissioner, and to the governor. And there's a lot of pressure to see if they can make an exception for this year. But currently, as it stands, in talking to Greg M., there is no exception. So, we may have to be, there are, a lot of districts that have just accepted that they're going to have to go into next year with the current budget. I really don't want that to happen because that then means we don't have money for the additional pre-K at Durham or the math teacher. I mean, I just think for us, it creates a lot of hurdles that I'd rather not have to overcome. But right now, there's not a simple solution to that, but everybody's talking at the moment.
Are they also thinking of the possibility of delaying the annual budget meeting and the referendum so that we may maybe begin with this year's budget, but then as soon as we can meet, we approve next year's budget so we don't see the hit for the entire year, but just for a couple of weeks?
So I think that's exactly what would happen, right? I mean,
yeah. And I think we just are waiting because I think that referendum vote is also like a vote in the towns, right? And so if we have to go with our own vote, I think that becomes more expensive. And I think right now we're just in this wait and see pattern. But yes, if we need to, we'll do that.
It would be similar to, and thankfully this isn't something we've had to deal with at RSU 5, but for the districts like Scarborough and folks up in the north that don't pass their budget the first or second or fourth time, they have to work under the prior year's budget until they can get a new budget passed. So I think the expectation is that as soon as, reasonably possible, we would get that 3-town meeting, and subsequent to that, 1 or I don't know if it's 7 or 10 days that we have to post for the referendum vote to get the budget passed. Kate.
I just was curious if we foresee needing to add any money to this proposed budget to address additional needs for next year to get kids back on track as a result of missing the end of this school year and doing the online learning instead. Is there going to be money needed for the summer program? How do we fund that if you do that for kids who need to catch up, or if you need additional supports for like RTI or I don't know, it could be any number of things. I guess you could also approach it differently with the schedule where you have to start next year off catching up on some things that may have been missed at the end of this year.
Yes, that's why I'm proposing, I mean, it's so hard to tell right now because we just don't know how long we're going to be into this way of life. But, my hope would be that we could do the summer academy like the last couple of weeks of June. If that wasn't possible, I think what I would then recommend is just taking it out of like contingency for like an additional teacher or something like that and using that money. Because I don't know. I think I'm sensitive to what's happening to people every day, how their lives are changing and people are getting laid off. So I think one of the areas that we're really fortunate with in RSU 5 is that you guys have supported, since I've been here, expanding our RTI for behavior, for academic. And so I feel like we have the staff that we need during the school year. So I think the only exception to that, Kate, would be, oh my gosh, we're not going to really get back to normal until July. And so our only opportunity for a summer program would be August. And then I think I would be requesting that we take that out of contingency.
Other, oh, Kate.
And I'm sure you haven't thought this far yet, but do you think there would be additional budget implications if we weren't able to start in September?
No, well, I think there would just be savings. I mean, I think it's just what we're seeing now, that when you're not running transportation and we don't need subs and overtime, that you can see how quickly that's compounded with our savings from what Ann has predicted.
Mara.
I'm just wondering if there's any additional information since last time that we should know about community programs. I know we were potentially anticipating a big shortfall there because of the lack of ability to run them. And do we anticipate that their balance that they have will cover that shortfall, or what will happen there?
I think I'll have Peter, who's looked at those numbers, really weigh in on that. I think he's more in the know on that than I am at this moment.
Hi guys. So yeah, we actually just today I was able to, I think, get to a figure, and Ann, correct me if I'm wrong with this, but we have a fund balance that is just over $400,000. So that is the good news. As I reported at last week's meeting, just in lost revenue from March 16th through April 26th, it looks like we're losing about $126,000 in revenue over that period of time, plus paying out salaries. Just having gotten that fund balance figure today, I would need just a little bit of time to do some math on how long we can pay salaries without taking in any revenue before that fund balance is dry. We can go, we can get through the spring. If we have to cancel summer programs, I'm really concerned about what that would mean. I think we have $43,000 or $44,000 in summer revenue that's already been taken in through the registration process. And if summer is scratched, then that's not money that we could reasonably hold on to and say, okay, we'll just credit your account. That's money that we're probably going to have to refund. So that we would take a pretty sizable hit of more than 10% of that fund balance, just if we had to scratch the summer. So we're hoping that we'll be able to salvage some, if not all of it. And we'll need a little more time, I think, just to do the math on that and see where things fall.
Kate. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, sure thing.
Just following up on the savings that we might expect if we don't get back to school next September, or I think that Peter kind of just touched on another issue as well that I'm trying to see if there's any need to plan in this budget. I mean, except for the fact that we have to be moving forward with approving the budget, I would say we don't need to worry about this yet. But what would we envision in September if we aren't able to go back to school? Yes, there may be savings, but would we continue with the same model we're on now, or would we look to invest in boosting the online platform? I'm not expecting you to have an answer for that right now. I just want to know if we're starting to think towards that and plan for that so that we could, I mean, the answer is yes, the current budget as proposed would be able to handle that, but can it handle also the challenges that Peter's going to be facing with his shortfall if he can't have his summer programs, or any other number of things that may occur that I'm not thinking of at the moment, by the domino effect of not being able to get things up and going come July 1st.
I think that if this becomes more long-term in places like community programs, there definitely would be probably a reduction in staff, because if you're not running any programs, you know, you can't just continue to have staff. So we have started talking about that and researching it, and Peter and I. So I don't feel like there's a better platform from what I know today. And, you know, we've talked about this a lot as superintendents, and I think even teacher to teacher. I don't think there's like a better, more robust platform that if we had another 100,000, oh, this online learning could be so much better. I think the online learning is going to get better from our teachers just, you know, using the model and learning from it. But the Google Classroom, I mean, that is what, you know, when I talk to my niece in Texas, that's what they're using down there. And so that is the platform I think that is most common. So I'm not concerned about that. If it goes long-term like you're talking about, I think it'll be interesting to see what the response is at the state level and the federal level, because I think the budget would support that learning. I think we're unique with community programs. And one of the things that I have to say is that Peter's a really creative thinker. And I will say that, you know, we haven't ruled out the need for daycare, right? And so that is the community programs provides a need in the community, and nothing in the order prevents us from running that. And so as we go forward, if we have a need to start bringing in revenue, you know, his team is very creative, and I think we start responding to the needs of our community. But we're so early into this, and you've all seen the target moving very quickly. So I can't predict exactly what it's going to look like, but I feel like this budget could support our needs around that. Kate.
And the same, I guess, would apply to the nutrition program.
I'll let Aaron talk, but I think we're like doing really well with revenues there. Aaron, would you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Are you talking about hold on one second.
Just talking about that, because we're approved, I think we're actually getting more funding for a meal than what we currently do in a regular school year. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. The reimbursement rates are higher for the summer meals program. And they also do reimburse some operating costs. I'm not clear exactly at this point what that number looks like, but I was doing some calculations of just the subsidies that we're expecting from the meal sales themselves, and it's most certainly going to cover a big chunk of our expenses.
And when you say meal sales, we're just saying meals that we're delivering, right? Like
yeah.
Nobody's paying for any of them, right? Okay. So even with this going out to whoever comes and picks them up, 18 and under, we actually could come out ahead of if we had kids paying as usual in the schools.
It's possible. It's certainly possible if you take into consideration the number of people who haven't paid for the meals that they've taken. So, you know, there's a lot of math to do on that and a lot of factors that I still have to look at, but I don't think we're going to be suffering any huge losses. In fact, we may have some gains on this one.
Jen. Am I muted? No.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
A question about the lunch thing for Erin, because she's on right now. So there was a lot of talk on the that meeting the other day about giving like the April vacation thing and giving the nutrition staff like a break. That was a lot of the reason why people were going to take that April vacation, was for that exact reason. So I just wanted to are we doing that too? It just seems like that would be the smart thing to do, to take a break from those meal deliveries over vacation.
All of my people are ready to work.
Really? That's fantastic. But is that like doable?
Yeah. I do. Yeah. And if it's not doable for everyone, you know, God forbid somebody ends up needing a break or being forced to take a break, I think we'll have the manpower to be able to cover them. And the state today obtained a waiver that allows for more meals per service. So maybe even being able to serve 5 meals or 7 meals at a time, which is a logistical nightmare in terms of storage if we did that as the only method of delivery. But for April vacation, it might be a viable alternative to reduce the number of total hours and give them a break for several days at a time.
Wow.
So we have a webinar tomorrow with DOE on that, and I'll know more information.
Great. Thanks.
Vali?
Erin, please thank your staff for that, because that's one of the concerns about having April vacation, is that the meal service stops. And I think a lot of people are going to need that food. So I'm so grateful to you and your staff for continuing on, even if everybody else goes on vacation.
Thank you. I will.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts on the budget? Okay. So do I have a motion for consideration and adoption of the superintendent's FY21 recommended budget as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Maddie. I saw Jen's hand go up as the second. And we will do the roll call. Kate?
Yes.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Candy?
Yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yep.
Beth?
Yes.
Mara?
Yes.
I'm voting yes. Vali?
Yes.
Maddie?
Yes.
All right, and that's everybody. Thank you, guys.
And I would like to thank you on behalf of the administrative team. You know, your support for us educating the kids of RSU 5. We always feel very supported by all of you. So thank you for that.
Thank you all.
And I would say that, you know, despite the sort of strange times we're working in, I think even with all that, I think the budget process went pretty smoothly this year, with some adjustments towards the end with, you know, with everything going on. But even with those, I think it went pretty smoothly. So thank you. Thanks for everybody's effort and time to dig in and understand everything that went into that budget. New business? Oh.
Yes, and other than like Jen and Charlie, I'd like to allow the other administrators to sign off.
Thank you, guys. Oh, the numbers just dropped drastically.
I can't imagine that they don't want to stay on. So this proposal, I you know, when I heard about it today, I, you know, so I've been kind of scurrying, and I know Jen and Charlie are still on the line, but Kate, I think this is a proposal that I initially thought about what you were saying about, you know, can our administrators kind of dig deep and do some creative thinking in these times? And so I think this is a very creative proposal that they're going to talk about tonight that is worth a discussion, no matter how we end up at the end of the evening. So I will turn it over to Jen and Charlie.
Does everybody have this?
No, they don't, because I think it was just.
Oh, okay.
They're
Yeah.
about to. This
Okay.
is my learning curve. Let's see if this works. Charlie and I were in a meeting today where they did this. So if you look on your chat function on the right hand side, there should be a link to a Google Doc.
That came through.
I'm going to actually post it twice because I'm going to make it public as well. Charlie said I could share my screen, which makes me a little worried since I've never tried that before. So
You actually can't share your screen. That was one of the FBI recommendations for people hijacking meetings to
okay, good.
lock down. So the host
Sorry.
can.
Okay.
Yes. Thanks,
I
Jeremy.
posted the link twice. The first link, you have to be on your RSU5 account. The second link, you do not. So if you're in a private email that you've linked into Zoom, Gmail, or something like that, you can use either link. So I appreciate the board even considering this. Not only did Becky see this proposal today, we made this proposal today. That's how fast we're moving these days. And just a little bit of background, if you will. Sorry about the light in my office here at home. I don't know how that's shining. It's like a spotlight. So this came from, I think everybody knows that we are always concerned about our seniors. You know, I wish I could say that it is a smooth and easy path for every student to get to graduation, and that is just not the case. And that's with live in-person teaching. And so on Friday, I think I shared with the board a couple of times that Charlie and I participated in a Zoom meeting with all of the principals, some of the assistant superintendents, and some assistant principals from Cumberland County, which was a fascinating meeting. We didn't get through it very much, and we're meeting again this Friday because every school had the chance to speak. So we focused on two things. We focused on grading, and we focused on seniors, and at the very end talked a little bit about attendance, which was how I was able to, you know, compare our attendance process to these other schools. And I can say that everybody is worried about seniors. We talked about how normally in our usual in-person school circumstance, our seniors generally, this is a big generalization, but our seniors generally fall into what one principal talked about as 4 categories. The first category is those students who are well beyond our graduation requirements, and we have no worries about them. We think that they're going to graduate with flying colors and feel confident about that. The second group is seniors who are struggling potentially with 1 or 2 classes. And we feel like even though they're struggling, we still feel confident that we'll be able to get them to the finish line, that they'll help, parents will help, teachers will help, and they'll get there. The third group is the kids that we absolutely drag across the finish line, or they drag themselves. That's with kind of it takes a village approach where we do anything and everything we can to help them finish. And that includes a lot of academic support and personal, social, emotional support to let them know we believe in them and that they can do it. And then the fourth group is our highest risk, I would say, for those of you who are involved in our dropout prevention committee, that would be our dropout list, the ones that are the most at risk, that we're the most worried about. And the point I want to make to the board is we worry about these kids when they are in front of us. Those last 2 categories of kids, the last 2 years, we've had something called Operation Graduation, which is basically like just do whatever it takes to help these kids be confident that they can finish and they can make it to graduation. We have lots of supports normally in place, and we're trying to put a lot of supports in place online. But as everybody knows, this is a totally unique and new situation, and our seniors who were already vulnerable could potentially be even more vulnerable. We've been really trying to think outside of the box for solutions in addition to our interventions. One thing that we heard on Friday is that lots of schools are trying to think about what kind of a meaningful project could seniors engage in during this time. And we are really lucky that we already have senior projects in place. There's only a few schools who have something similar to that. However, our current format of senior projects is a very rigorous process that we have put in place, and we're proud of it. Our two senior project coordinators were asked to present at a conference in Texas about their whole system. But the trouble with that is that some of our highest risk students are often not able to participate. They have to have attendance requirements, they have to have grade requirements, and they are usually the ones who don't participate. So this proposal that Charlie and I have written is twofold. One is to reduce the total number of credits required for graduation only for the class of 2020. In researching credit requirements at other schools, which we've actually been doing for the past couple of years, there's lots of reasons for that. Some of that was the Region 10 work that I know some of you have been involved in or aware of. But you'll see that our credit requirements are higher than any other school in our cohort. And they're significantly higher than some schools like Falmouth, which requires 15.5 credits, or Greeley, which requires 18 credits to our 24 credits. So the second element of this proposal is that if we were to reduce the number of credits required for this graduating class, we would be able to increase the number of students who are participating in a senior project. If they were meeting their requirements and passing their classes by, we chose May 1st, because that would be the normal time that kids would have gone out on projects. Then we have put into this proposal ways that we think that more seniors would be eligible to participate in a senior project. And our two senior project coordinators, who are two of our teachers, are already working with our community outreach coordinator, Dee Dee Bennell, to come up with a list of options of how kids could do senior projects, given the current state of the pandemic and the crisis that we're in. We still think that kids can have some really meaningful learning opportunities. And all of our senior projects have some sort of community connection, which we know could be so important in this time right now. So we feel like this proposal recognizes the crisis of the world that we are in right now, while helping to still keep our students to high standards, and helping them engage in meaningful learning opportunities at the end of this year that has been incredibly difficult for the class of 2020, starting with the loss of one of their class members and then ending with this pandemic. So I know you haven't had time. That's my pitch. I know you haven't had time to really dig into this whole proposal, but the idea is we looked at our current graduation requirements at 24. And feel that, we looked at going all the way down. The state requirements are 12.5, which I think are quite low. And Dr. Foley agreed 24 to jumping to 12.5 is not quite a reasonable jump. We looked at Falmouth's requirement, which is only 15.5. Charlie and I spoke, and I spoke to our head of guidance tonight, that most of our students have already finished their world language requirement. We have very, very few seniors who would be in a level 1 language course right now. Most of them have also finished lots of the courses that are on that list. So we felt like going down to 18 credits would be reasonable. and looks very similar to the other schools in our cohort. And keep in mind that students who have already applied to a 4-year university have gone way beyond these credits, because those schools want 4 years of English, 4 years of math, 4 years of science, 2 years of a world language. So we have a significant portion of our population who is already well beyond those 18 credits. So then down at the bottom of the proposal, okay, I don't have a printed copy in front of me. So at the bottom of the proposal, you can see where we started. We put a comparison just for you to be able to see some of the graduation requirements of schools in the cohort. And then we talked about, one important piece of this is that 95 of our seniors, 95 of our 132 seniors have already proposed some sort of senior project. Some of those were not approved. They just didn't have the requirements that we ask of them, or they, hadn't fleshed out their community connection or community give back part, but we feel like those could be revised. The problem is if students are struggling and are failing some of those classes, even if, say, they're well beyond those 18 credits and they're struggling in some of those classes, they would no longer be able to participate in senior projects in the way that we have it set up right now with the 24 credits. So and then down at the bottom, before I stop to take questions, I think we would really push this community service or community connection piece. I know that Yarmouth is planning to continue with they have the highest community service requirement of 60 hours. That's a longstanding requirement that they've had. Falmouth has 30 hours, and both schools are considering keeping that requirement in place and helping kids think about what community service looks like right now, which could be as simple as finding an elderly person who is confined to their home and calling them every day and talking about current events or the weather or anything. So, there's been a lot of talk about we'll have to help these kids of what these projects could look like. So that's the proposal, and I'd love to hear thoughts or questions. I don't know, Charlie, if I missed anything, and Charlie, you need to chime in or want to chime in.
Well, first of all, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all. And I just want to reiterate, one thing that Jen said, about in a typical year, which we all know this is not a typical year, when we are dragging some of these students across the finish line, unfortunately, the work that they're doing is not something that's going to be very meaningful. It's just kind of cramming the last couple of months of their high school career to say they finished the credits that they needed to. With this proposal, what I like most about it is that this could be super meaningful for these students, something that they'll take away for a long time and not forget. So I think that's a really important part of important selling point in doing this type of work with these kids. So that's all I'd add.
And thanks, Charlie. And one thing that I wanted to say is that this is an important part that I probably didn't emphasize, is that we would be giving the students the option of participating. Not every kid wants to do a senior project. I do think that the presentation in the FPAC holds a lot of kids back, and we've made some revisions. Last year was the first year that we did what we call closed presentations. So they were not required to present to the entire FPAC. Those students could invite who they wanted to. And so if they were to present using Zoom, I think that we and invite whoever they want, or as few people as they want, other than the project coordinators and their advisor. I think that we might see more kids participating who would have never, taken the option of a senior project. But we do recognize that not everyone will want to do this, and those kids would just continue with their online learning classes as they are right now.
Kate. Just reading my question. I didn't think you would call on me so quickly. I have a couple questions. I can do them one at a time to give others an opportunity as well. First question, or first I want to say thank you for putting this together, because I know this is something that is really weighing on a lot of families' minds. I have a morning meeting every day with people at work, and this is actually what the main topic of conversation is people who have seniors. And this is like not a school related call, it's a work related call. They're worried about graduation requirements. So I think it's important that we get something out there soon to parents and to seniors. So I appreciate you putting this together. My first question is, I don't think you're looking for us to approve it right now, but will you be rolling?
No, I think we are, right?
Are you asking us to approve this?
I know,
Yes.
I know. We are only because we don't have another board meeting until April 29th. And there's a policy, and I would look to Cynthia to find that while I'm talking, so that, you know, that's why we need a board vote, because we would otherwise be breaking policy.
Okay, so it's the graduation requirement.
Yes, you're right.
Okay, so I guess my only concern would be at this point is whether this has been rolled out and received any stakeholder input. Probably not, since you drafted it today.
Just our input. You're muted, Jen.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm looking to Jen for that.
The people who were involved today were we started the conversation with the 3 guidance counselors yesterday. The 2 senior project coordinators weighed in on this. We had a meeting with them today. And then I spoke again to the head of guidance. And so we have not involved students in this conversation, because I can guess what they would say. And like you said, it was just done so quickly that I think you know, we didn't have a lot of time for stakeholder input. One thing we did talk about today is that it is a significant commitment that every single student who has a project has a faculty advisor. And because some teachers are totally managing right now and are okay, others, you know, are barely just treading water with their own kids, that we would get creative about who could be an advisor. So I spoke to Craig Sickles today about being an advisor. I spoke to Lori Pitcavage in the main office about being an advisor. We would really think outside of the box of who could take this on, so that teachers could decide whether they have capacity for this right now, or pass it off to someone else.
Maddie, we'll come back to you, Kate, though, because I think you had more, right? Yeah. Maddie.
So I've been moved to tears like 3 or 4 times during this meeting. And I'm so moved by the work you've done on this, and I'm a huge fan of it. Just thinking about this class in particular and the way they started their year and the way that they're ending their year. The opportunity this presents to me, it feels like an opportunity to get many more kids involved in senior project than normally would enter, and you know, with who knows what graduation is going to look like. I mean, this could be significantly meaningful. Just a couple thoughts might be, there is already in place, just got put together a week and a half ago, a senior call program. I think Freeport Friends put that together. So that's all. Maura is very familiar with that. So that's something that you could probably tap kids into for the kind of thing you were talking about. I'm also thinking about the strain on mental health resources throughout the state. I wonder about programs like NAMI Maine or Casco Bay CAN or something. Those might be opportunities to get engaged as well. And then with regard to getting creative around advisors, maybe you could reach back into some of the other schools, some of the middle schools, you know, maybe teachers that kids had when they were younger. Just some thoughts, but I really applaud your work and I thank you for it.
Thank you. And I will say, we are so incredibly fortunate to have Dee Dee Bennell. Dee Dee came up with a 3-page menu document today of what kids could do, because she has actually already been emailing kids about volunteer opportunities right now, to just say, if you have the time and the space, here are some ways that you can give back. And so some of those were things she's already sent to kids, but then she came up with some other ideas, which is great. But thank you for those 2 ideas too.
Jen Galetta.
Okay, sorry. So I just have a couple of thoughts. I know Vali and I are the 2 on the board that actually have seniors this year. So Maddie, if you think you've been brought to tears, having one has been a big struggle. Just to bring this up, and I do have a question about the senior projects, but like, the one thing I keep hearing, and having a senior, and I'm sure Vali can agree to this, my daughter has said, like, I don't care about prom, I don't care about this. She doesn't care about 99% of what's going on. They care about graduation, and they care about having a graduation. So I know that we can't even begin to have that conversation now because it's too early and we have too many other issues going on. But I just want to put that out there because I did make a promise to every kid I've talked to that I wouldn't let it go. So anyway, that being said, the only other question I have about the projects, about the senior projects, is I just know what my daughter's doing. Are those going to change? Because it does not appear that the project that she has planned with a couple other students would be able to happen with the restrictions that are now in place, as far as, only going to and from work. I mean, they were going to like paint a mural at a restaurant in Freeport. There were 4 of them. So it doesn't seem like that's going to be able to happen. So is it going to be that everyone's going to sort of tweak the project that they have already had approved, or come up with something different? Like, that's the one thing I'm a little confused about. Everything with the credits, I'm totally good with. That seems very reasonable.
So 2 things. First is about graduation. I shared with the board last week that, personally for me, my cousin is a senior in Virginia. So I've been in touch with her school and about just ask them to share when they come up with their idea, because their graduation will be in May. But then on Thursday, Vermont canceled school for the rest of the year. And I've shared with the board that I'm in that principals PLC group that we meet, and that group's actually meeting once a week right now. And so I work most closely with 4 of the Vermont principals. So, in sadness, we are going to benefit that they are planning now for graduation, and that the 4 individuals that I work with from Vermont are some of the most creative and thoughtful administrators I've ever worked with. And so one of them comes from a school that I just aspire to have as much student voice as he does in his school. And so I'm going to be looking to them. They met yesterday, and I wasn't able to attend the one yesterday, but I'm going to find out from them what they're doing for graduation, so that, we can, if we have to plan for that we'll have some other schools, to at least use as a model, and then figure out what works for us.
That's awesome. I just know that a lot of colleges, which is a completely different situation, I understand, have canceled their graduations. And I think that has really started to put a little bit more strain on our seniors. I've tried to explain that, when a college, people come from all over the world. And so once school is over and everyone leaves, like, our kids are in Freeport, Durham, and Pownell. So, I try not to make the same connection, but I'm so happy to hear that you were thinking about, and not that I didn't think you were, I knew you guys were, but that you're thinking about it and trying to plan ahead. So I appreciate that.
And it's a concerning factor, because I can just imagine, I love these teenagers to death, but when we tell them to stay 6 feet away on their graduation, I have a sneaky feeling that is going to be incredibly difficult for us to say, just virtually high five and you can't hug each other. And, I'm worried about that, but I think we'll talk about that when we get closer. As for the projects, the 2 coordinators went through all of the projects. I can't triply change my screen right now, but I have the numbers. It's something, I believe, out of the 61 projects, that 16 of them could continue as is. For example, somebody who is designing an app, that can keep going. There were 25 of them that need, maybe 10 of them that needed slight revisions, and 25 of them that cannot continue. They were internships. They were, just as you are talking about your daughter's project. And so we talked about that there would be a group of people who would be working with the kids who've already proposed a project to revise that, come up with something new, and a much shorter, less rigorous process for proposing that. And then another group of people who would work with the kids who didn't propose anything. And we did talk today about how do we make it feel, I don't know if special is the word, but a little bit more special for the kids who were on top of this and proposed a project in February. Are there some of the requirements that we lighten up for those kids to just recognize, hey, we know that you did this, wholeheartedly on time. But again, the kids who didn't do it probably weren't able to and knew that with their grades. And so we don't want to penalize those kids either. So, but we did talk about that they're going to need some coaching to revise these projects or start from scratch.
Bali.
I just have to report that our senior is very, very happy that the senior projects are happening. I just told him he wasn't sure whether they're going to happen, and he is delighted. So thank you so much for putting that front and center for the last month of their senior year, because I think they all look forward to that, or most of them look forward to that. And it's something hands-on and PV and all those nice things, project-based, that we try to basically do in our school for the benefit of all the students. And so I have a question about the AP exams. Are those happening? When are they? How does that relate to senior projects? And does this mean that whenever the kids have the AP exams, they just then go full-time to senior project and they do not have to attend online schooling for any of the, say, electives or non-AP classes?
No, that's a great question. So, so in a normal circumstance, any student who is doing a senior project and is in an AP class commits to doing both at the same time. And so they continue, if we were in school, in the building, kids for AP classes come into the building, even if they're doing their project, until the exam happens. And so that's been a long-standing practice. So we would keep that practice, that the exams have been shortened, but they are still holding exams. But that's a major difference. They're going to be 45-minute shortened exams. And all the students have all that information about what has come out so far. I think there's still some details that they're working on about test security and things like that. But that would continue to be our practice, that kids know that if they're in an AP class, they have to do both.
So they continue to go to the online AP class until the date of the exam. But for the classes that are non-AP, they end the online schooling on the 1st of May.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. If you see the proposal, what we said was if they were failing one class, normally they would not be allowed to participate in projects. And we would make the exception that if they were failing one class, they would have the option of doing a project and continuing with that class. Whereas normally that would just count them out. We did put in the logistics too, that we would give kids a week. We felt like that was reasonable to do their senior project work. And if they weren't doing it, then they would have to return to online classes, which is also a practice that we have. That's a long-standing practice. So if a student had gone out on senior projects and were completely blowing off their senior project, they were required to return to school. We sometimes have one or two of those students that have to do that, or zero some years, but very few completely blow off a project that they have chosen themselves.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say I am fully in favor of this plan. I think it's excellent, and I think these kids do need a break. So I appreciate being flexible to make their last month of the last year in high school something they can enjoy.
Thank you.
Okay, so, oh, I do see another. Oh, right, back to Kate. Sorry. Thank you for putting your hand back up.
Yeah. Okay, so I just wanted to go back. I think someone mentioned a few ideas for senior projects, and I had one, which was maybe there's a way our seniors can help some of our younger learners.
Mhm.
That's just one idea.
I'll just say that was on our list because some of the kids' projects were to intern in the elementary schools.
Yeah.
And so I actually think that that could be a huge help because I would dare to say that 100% of our students are capable with Google Classroom. Many of our teachers use that, and they could be a huge help to those teachers.
Yeah. Oh yeah, to the teacher directly too. The other thing I wanted to just say about the my question before about rolling out to the stakeholders, since we're not going to have the opportunity to really run it by them, I like that you've considered kind of like what could be the negative consequences of this to those that maybe had like you said, planned ahead and were on top of this, and you could get like a little bit of blowback from that. Just like when we communicate this out to students and parents, just making sure we address that sort of stuff up front, just be really deliberate in our communication and make sure that people don't feel like this is, they didn't have a say in something, or just to kind of put people's minds at ease up front so that we're not seeing any sort of blowback, like I said. But my second question was, I was kind of looking quickly. I know you mentioned the May 1st date, and there was something about that if they could choose to forgo a senior project and continue with their online classes based on some sort of cutoff there with the May 1st date. I was just wondering, do you foresee that if for some amazing miracle happened and we ended up back in school by then, would you continue this model? Once you get it going, we wouldn't change and go back to the original graduation requirements, would we?
I would hope not. I mean, if we were able to do this, because, well, it would be incredibly, let me go backwards. So the May 1st deadline, we picked that deadline because that's what it would have been. Normally, the seniors come back from April break. They have a week of finals, and then May 1st is their last final if they are going out on senior projects. And senior projects start the following Monday. And so if we were to go back to school, I would say, in my opinion, we would not be able to go backwards because we would have let kids leave, go on to a project, and it would be incredibly difficult to pull all those kids back into their online classes. So this would be what I would propose, whether we were coming back or not.
Valley.
Yeah, I would like to follow up with Kate's question, and just wanting to be clear that this is just for this year, but moving forward, we still have the same requirements that we used to have, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and about the communication also, the way it's communicated, it's important too. So for the kids who are really putting all the effort and are doing well with the online schooling, if they can be communicated in a way that doesn't basically take the wind out of their wings and they decide, oh, I don't need to do this anymore. I'm just going to give up right this second. Yeah, I'm sure that you guys will do a good job, but that's one concern, that the kids who are doing well, they interpret this as, okay, this is my opportunity to just not do anything else for the rest of the year. And maybe their GPA won't be as good as it would have been otherwise. Yeah. So I totally understand the need for the kids who need this extra support, but hopefully it won't basically give everyone an opportunity to just go on vacation right now.
Well, the requirement will still be that they have to be passing their classes by May 1st, anybody. So otherwise, and what we put in the proposals, we said if they were failing 2 or more classes, then they would not be able to participate, because that would be a significant load to carry to have potentially 2 or more classes that you have to continue plus your senior project. Not sure that they would be able to manage all those hours, because it's a significant hour requirement for senior projects per week, because that's the only thing that they're focused on, that they're doing.
Okay, so I don't, excuse me, I don't see any other hands up. So I would take a motion for consideration and approval to modify policy IKF, graduation requirements, to reduce the graduation requirement to 18 credits from 24 credits for the graduating class of 2020. Lindsay and Valley, thank you. And we'll go through the list. Kate.
Wait, hold on.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yep.
Can we amend that to say for this year only?
I said for the graduating class of 2020.
Oh,
so.
sorry. Thank you.
Okay, everybody ready? Okay. Kate.
Yes.
Jeremy.
Yes.
Candy.
Yes.
Lindsay.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Susanna.
Yes.
Beth.
Yes.
Maura.
Yes.
I'm voting yes. Valley.
Yes.
And Maddie.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for all your work, Jen and Charlie. I know this has been obviously crazy times, and to be, changing this stuff as completely and as well as you have is really a testament. So thanks for all your work on that.
And I just want to say thanks to Dr. Foley for allowing us to, pester her with crazy ideas and then beg her to bring it to the board. So thank you.
She knows we love a good crazy idea.
You're more than welcome. Thank you for your work.
Cynthia has her hand up.
Yeah.
Hi, Michelle. Could you just read the motion one more time?
Yes.
Please. Thank you.
The motion to modify policy IKF, graduation requirements, to reduce the graduation requirement to 18 credits from 24 credits for the graduating class of 2020.
Thank you.
Okay, so we don't have any personnel. I don't think we have any public left on, do we? Because this would be oh no, they're still, Nancy's still on there according to this. I don't know if she's still listening, but she's technically still in the meeting. So if we had anybody in the public who wanted to share anything, same rules apply, just put your hand up and we will give you the floor. Okay. Nancy. Maybe. She's on mute. You can unmute her. She's moving around on my screen. I don't see her hand up now. Maybe she didn't mean to put her hand up. So Nancy, if you do want to speak, put your hand up again. I have a couple things to just go over with the board real quick. So if we see your name pop up again, we'll figure out how to get you on. But just a couple of things, because we've adopted the budget and the discussion around the warrants being moved to the end of the month so that Anne has sufficient time to review. Because remember, tomorrow's packet would next week's packet would have to go out tomorrow. So we'd have to have the warrants done by tomorrow on the budget we adopted tonight. So the idea of moving that to the next meeting in April means that we don't have anything on the agenda for next week. So we will cancel the April 8th board meeting. You're welcome. And also just a reminder to keep an eye out tomorrow.
I'll mail them out tomorrow.
Okay.
You'll get them by Saturday the latest.
Okay, so check your mail. You will be getting a package of information. This is in regards to the superintendent's evaluation. The administrators have performed their feedback process, and so you'll get a memo from me. I don't know why it's echoing. You'll get a memo and as well as that admin feedback. I'll remind everybody it's confidential information. We don't usually mail it, but these are unusual times. And it'll have that timeline of what we do next in the process. And you'll get a link to our portion of the evaluation April 8th. So next Wednesday. So when you guys are not at the meeting, you guys could be working on your superintendent evaluations. And right, so the 3 new people, the folks that this is the first time going through this process in full, I'll reach out to you guys each individually in the next couple of days and just sort of walk you through how this works. And I see Maddie's hand up.
Just because I can't help myself, please, everybody, do the evaluation. There's no good reason not to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie. And I think we had like full participation on the admin side, which I think is the first time ever, which is fantastic. So thank you to all the admin who are no longer listening. And I think that's it. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. You'll get a package in the mail with all of that information. No meeting next week. The link will open up for the board members to do their piece of the evaluation a week from today. And with that, what's that?
I just want to make sure you said everything.
Oh, okay. Ginny's just making sure I haven't forgotten anything. Hold on before we adjourn. We're good?
Yep.
Okay. So I would take a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Beth. Did I see anybody else's hand go up for a second? Kate, thank you.
Does Kate have a question or was
No, she was seconding our motion to adjourn. Kate.
Yes.
Jeremy.
Yes.
Candy.
Yes.
Lindsay.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Susanna.
Yes.
Beth.
Yes.
Mara.
Yes.
I'm voting yes. Vali.
Yes.
And Maddie.
Yes.
Thank you all very much. I think it gets better each time. So I appreciate everybody's help. Keep an eye out for the information from Ginny and from me on the eval. And we'll see everybody in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 4 weeks. Yeah.
Wow.
You guys got a nice break. Enjoy.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.